Chapter 9. The Abbe de Herblay. At the extremity of the village, Planchet turned to the left in obedience to the orders of Aramis, and stopped underneath the window, which had light in it. Aramis alighted and clapped his hands 3 times. Immediately the window was opened, and a ladder of rope was let down from it. "My friend," said Aramis, "if you like to ascend I shall be delighted to receive you." "Ah," said D'Artagnan, "is that the way you return to your apartment?" "After 9 at night, part02," said Aramis. "The rule of the convent is very severe." "Pardon me, my dear friend," said D'Artagnan, "I think you said part02." "Do you think so?" said Aramis, smiling. "It is possible. You have no idea, my dear fellow, how one acquires bad habits in these cursed convents, or what evil ways all these men of the church have, with whom I am obliged to live. But will you not go up? Pass on before me, I beg of you, as the late cardinal used to say to the late king, only to show you the way, sire." And Aramis ascended the ladder quickly, and reached the window in an instant. D'Artagnan followed, but less nimbly, showing plainly that this mode of ascent was not one to which he was accustomed. "I beg your pardon," said Aramis, noticing his awkwardness. "If I had known that I was to have the honor of your visit I should have procured the gardener's ladder, but for me alone this is good enough." "Sir," said Planchet when he saw D'Artagnan on the summit of the ladder, "this way is easy for Monsieur Aramis, an evening for you. In case of necessity I may also climb up, but my 2 horses cannot mount the ladder." "Take them to over their shed, my friend," said Aramis, pointing to a low building on the plain. "There you will find hay and straw for them. Then come back here and clap your hands 3 times, and we will give you wine and food. Marry, forsooth, people don't die of hunger here." And Aramis, drawing in the ladder, closed the window. D'Artagnan then looked around attentively. Never was there an apartment at the same time more warlike and more elegant. At each corner were arranged trophies, presenting to view swords of all sorts, and on the walls hung 4 great pictures representing in their ordinary military costume the Cardinal de Lorraine, the Cardinal de Richelieu, the Cardinal de la Valette, and the Archbishop of Bordeaux. Exteriorly, nothing in the room showed that it was the habitation of an abbe. The hangings were of damask, the carpets from a linen, and the bed, especially, had more the look of a fine lady's couch, with its trimmings of fine lace and its embroidered counterpane, than that of a man who had made a vow that he would endeavor to gain heaven by fasting and mortification. "You are examining my den," said Aramis. "Ah, my dear fellow, excuse me, I am lodged like a chartreux. But what are you looking for?" "I am looking for the person who let down the ladder. I see no one, and yet the ladder didn't come down of itself." "No, it is Bazin." Ah, said D'Artagnan. "But," continued Aramis, "Bazin is a well-trained servant, and seeing that I was not alone he discreetly retired. Sit down, my dear friend, and let us talk." And Aramis pushed forward a large easy chair, in which D'Artagnan stretched himself out. "In the first place, you will sup with me, will you not?" asked Aramis. "Yes, if you really wish it," said D'Artagnan, "an evening with great pleasure. I confess, the journey has given me a devil of an appetite." "Ah, my poor friend," said Aramis, "you will find meager fare. You were not expected. Am I then threatened with the omelette of C.R. Vecker?" "Oh, let us hope," said Aramis, "that with the help of God and of Bazin we shall find something better than that in the larder of the worthy Jesuit fathers. Bazin, my friend, come here." The door opened, and Bazin entered. On perceiving the musketeer he uttered an exclamation that was almost a cry of despair. "My dear Bazin," said D'Artagnan, "I am delighted to see with what wonderful composure you can tell a lie evening in church." "Sir," replied Bazin, "I have been taught by the good Jesuit fathers that it is permitted to tell a falsehood when it is told in a good cause." "So far well," said Aramis. "We are dying of hunger. Serve us up the best supper you can, and especially give us some good wine." Bazin bowed low, sighed, and left the room. "Now we are alone, dear Aramis," said D'Artagnan. "Tell me how the devil you managed to alight upon the back of Planchet's horse." "I'faith," answered Aramis, "as you see, from heaven," replied D'Artagnan, shaking his head. You have no more the appearance of coming from there than you have of going there, my friend, said Aramis, with a look of imbecility on his face which D'Artagnan had never observed whilst he was in the Musketeers. If I did not come from heaven, at least I was leaving paradise, which is almost the same. Here, then, is a puzzle for the learned, observed D'Artagnan. Until now they have never been able to agree as to the situation of paradise. Some place it on Mount Ararat, others between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. It seems that they have been looking very far away for it, while it was actually very near. Paradise is at Noisy-le-Sec, upon the site of the Archbishop's Ch. People do not go out from it by the door, but by the window. One doesn't descend here by the marble steps of a peristyle, but by the branches of a lime tree, and the angel with a flaming sword who guards this Elysium seems to have changed his celestial name of Gabriel into that of the more terrestrial one of the Prince de Marsillac. Aramis burst into a fit of laughter. You were always a merry companion, my dear D'Artagnan, he said, and your witty Gascon fancy has not deserted you. Yes, there is something in what you say, nevertheless. Do not believe that it is Madame de Longueville with whom I am in love. A plague on't. I shall not do so. After having been so long in love with Madame de Chevreuse, you would hardly lay your heart at the feet of her mortal enemy. Yes, replied Aramis, with an absent air, yes, that poor Duchess. I once loved her much, and to do her justice, she was very useful to us. Eventually she was obliged to leave France. He was a relentless enemy, that damned cardinal, continued Aramis, glancing at the portrait of the old minister. He had even given orders to arrest her, and would have cut off her head had she not escaped with her waiting maid. Poor Kitty, I have heard that she met with a strange adventure in I don't know what village, with I don't know what cur, of whom she asked hospitality and who, having but one chamber, and taking her for a cavalier, offered to share it with her. For she had a wonderful way of dressing as a man, that dear Marie. I know only one other woman who can do it as well. So they made this song about her, La Boissière, dis-moi. You know it, don't you? No, sing it, please. Aramis immediately complied, and sang the song in a very lively manner. Bravo, cried D'Artagnan, you sing charmingly, dear Aramis. I do not perceive that singing masses has spoiled your voice. My dear D'Artagnan, replied Aramis, you understand, when I was a musketeer I mounted guard as seldom as I could. Now when I'm an abbé I say as few masses as I can. But to return to our Duchess. Which, the Duchess de Chevreuse or the Duchess de Longueville? Have I not already told you that there is nothing between me and the Duchess de Longueville? Little flirtations, perhaps, and that's all. No, I spoke of the Duchess de Chevreuse. Did you see her after her return from Brussels, after the king's death? Yes, she is still beautiful. Yes, said Aramis, I saw her also at that time. I gave her good advice, by which she did not profit. I ventured to tell her that Mazarin was the lover of Anne of Austria. She wouldn't believe me, saying that she knew Anne of Austria, who was too proud to love such a worthless coxcomb. After that she plunged into the cabal headed by the Duke of Beaufort, and the coxcomb arrested de Beaufort and banished Madame de Chevreuse. You know, resumed D'Artagnan, that she has had leave to return to France. Yes, she is come back and is going to commit some fresh folly or another. Oh, but this time perhaps she will follow your advice. Oh, this time, returned Aramis, I haven't seen her. She is much changed. In that respect unlike you, my dear Aramis, for you are still the same. You have still your beautiful dark hair, still your elegant figure, still your feminine hands, which are admirably suited to a prelate. Yes, replied Aramis, I am extremely careful of my appearance. Do you know that I am growing old? I am nearly 37. Mind, Aramis, D'Artagnan smiled as he spoke, since we are together again, let us agree on one point. What age shall we be in future? How? Formerly I was your junior by 2 or 3 years, and if I am not mistaken I am turned 40 years old. Truly, then it is I who am mistaken, for you have always been a good chronologist. By your reckoning I must be 43 at least. The devil I am. Don't let it out at the Hotel Rambouillet, it would ruin me, replied the abbé. Don't be afraid, said D'Artagnan. I never go there. Why, what in the world, cried Aramis, is that animal Bazin doing? Bazin, hurry up there, you rascal, we are mad with hunger and thirst. Bazin entered at that moment carrying a bottle in each hand. At last, said Aramis, we are ready, are we? Yes, monsieur, quite ready, said Bazin, but it took me some time to bring up all the because you always think you have on your shoulders your beadle's robe, and spend all your time reading your breviary. But I give you warning that if in polishing your chapel utensils you forget how to brighten up my sword, I will make a great fire of your blessed images and will see that you are roasted on it. Bazin, scandalized, made a sign of the cross with the bottle in his hand. D'Artagnan, more surprised than ever at the tone and manners of the Abbe de Herblay, which contrasted so strongly with those of the musketeer Aramis, remained staring with wide-open eyes at the face of his friend. Bazin quickly covered the table with a damask cloth and arranged upon it so many things, gilded, perfumed, appetizing, that D'Artagnan was quite overcome. "But you expected someone, then?" asked the officer. "Oh," said Aramis, "I always try to be prepared. And then I knew you were seeking me." "From whom?" "From Master Bazin, to be sure. He took you for the devil, my dear fellow, and hastened to warn me of the danger that threatened my soul if I should meet again a companion so wicked as an officer of musketeers." "Oh, monsieur," said Bazin, clasping his hands supplicatingly, "come, no hypocrisy. You know that I don't like it. You will do much better to open the window and let down some bread, a chicken and a bottle of wine to your friend Planchet, who has been this last hour killing himself clapping his hands." Planchet, in fact, had bedded and fed his horses, and then coming back under the window had repeated 2 or 3 times the signal agreed upon. Bazin obeyed, fastened to the end of a cord the 3 articles designated and let them down to Planchet, who then went satisfied to his shed. "Now to supper," said Aramis. The 2 friends sat down, and Aramis began to cut up fowls, partridges, and hams with admirable skill. "The deuce!" cried D'Artagnan. "Do you live in this way always?" "Yes, pretty well. The coadjutor has given me dispensations from fasting on the jurors makers, on account of my health. Then I have engaged as my cook the cook who lived with Lafalone, you know the man I mean, the friend of the cardinal, and the famous epicure whose grace after dinner used to be, 'Good Lord, do me the favor to cause me to digest what I have eaten.' Nevertheless he died of indigestion, in spite of his grace," said D'Artagnan. "What can you expect?" replied Aramis in a tone of resignation. "Every man that's born must fulfill his destiny. If it be not an indelicate question," resumed D'Artagnan, "have you grown rich?" "Oh, heaven, no! I make about 12,000 francs a year, without counting a little benefice of 1,000 crowns the prince gave me." "And how do you make your 12,000 francs? By your poems?" "No, I have given up poetry, except now and then to write a drinking song, some gay sonnet or some innocent epigram. I compose sermons, my friend." "What, sermons? Do you preach them?" "No, I sell them to those of my cloth who wish to become great orators." "Ah, truly, and you have not been tempted by the hopes of reputation yourself?" "I should, my dear D'Artagnan, have been so, but nature said no. When I am in the pulpit, if by chance a pretty woman looks at me, I look at her again. If she smiles, I smile too. Then I speak at random. Instead of preaching about the torments of hell, I talk of the joys of paradise." An event took place in the church of St. Louis O'Marais. A gentleman laughed in my face. I stopped short to tell him that he was a fool. The congregation went out to get stones to stone me with, but whilst they were away I found means to conciliate the priests who were present, so that my foe was pelted instead of me. It is true that he came the next morning to my house, thinking that he had to do with an abbe, like all other abbes. And what was the end of the affair? We met in the Place Royale, Eged. You know about it. Was I not your second? Cried D'Artagnan. You were. You know how I settled the matter. Did he die? I don't know. But, at all events, I gave him absolution in articulo mortis. It is enough to kill the body without killing the soul. Bazin made a despairing sign, which meant that while perhaps he approved the moral, he'd altogether disapproved the tone in which it was uttered. Bazin, my friend, said Aramis, you don't seem to be aware that I can see you in that mirror, and you forget that once for all I have forbidden all signs of approbation or disapprobation. You will do me the favor to bring us some Spanish wine and then to withdraw. Besides, my friend D'Artagnan has something to say to me privately, have you not, D'Artagnan? D'Artagnan nodded his head, and Bazin retired, after placing on the table the Spanish wine. The two friends, left alone, remained silent, face to face. Aramis seemed to await a comfortable digestion, D'Artagnan to be preparing his exordium. Each of them, when the other was not looking, hazarded a sly glance. It was Aramis who broke the silence. What are you thinking of, D'Artagnan? He began. I was thinking, my dear old friend, that when you were a musketeer you turned your thoughts incessantly to the church, and now that you are an abbé you are perpetually longing to be once more a musketeer. It is true, man, as you know, said Aramis, is a strange animal made up of contradictions. Since I became an abbé I dream of nothing but battles. That is apparent in your surroundings. You have rapiers here of every form and to suit the most exacting taste. Do you still fence well? I fence as well as you did in the old time. Better still, perhaps. I do nothing else all day. And with whom? With an excellent master-at-arms that we have here. What? Here? Yes, here, in this convent, my dear fellow. There is everything in a Jesuit convent. Then you would have killed Monsieur de Marsillac if he had come alone to attack you, instead of at the head of 20 men? Undoubtedly, said Aramis, an evening at the head of his 20 men, if I could have drawn without being recognized. God pardon me, said D'Artagnan to himself, I believe he has become more Gascon than I am. Then aloud, well, my dear Aramis, do you ask me why I came to seek you? No, I have not asked you that, said Aramis, with his subtle manner, but I have expected you to tell me. Well, I sought you for the single purpose of offering you a chance to kill Monsieur de Marsillac whenever you please, prince though he is. Hold on, wait, said Aramis, that is an idea, of which I invite you to take advantage, my friend. Let us see. With your 1,000 crowns from the abbey and the 12,000 francs you make by selling sermons, are you rich? Answer frankly. I am as poor as Job, and were you to search my pockets and my boxes I don't believe you would find 100 pistols. Peste! 100 pistols, said D'Artagnan to himself. He calls that being as poor as Job. If I had them I should think myself as rich as C.R. Sus. Then aloud, are you ambitious? As Enceladus. Well, my friend, I bring you the means of becoming rich, powerful, and free to do whatever you wish. The shadow of a cloud passed over Aramis's face as quickly as that which in August passes over the field of grain. But quick as it was, it did not escape D'Artagnan's observation. Speak on, said Aramis. One question first. Do you take any interest in politics? A gleam of light shone in Aramis's eyes, as brief as the shadow that had passed over his face, but not so brief but that it was seen by D'Artagnan. No, Aramis replied. Then proposals from any quarter will be agreeable to you, since for the moment you have no master but God. It is possible. Have you, my dear Aramis, thought sometimes of those happy, happy, happy days of youth we passed laughing, drinking, and fighting each other for play? Certainly, and more than once regretted them. It was truly a glorious time. Well, those splendidly wild days may chance to come again. I am commissioned to find out my companions, and I began by you, who were the very soul of our society. Aramis bowed, rather with respect than pleasure at the compliment. To meddle in politics, he exclaimed, in a languid voice, leaning back in his easy chair. Ah, dear D'Artagnan, see how regularly I live and how easy I am here. We have experienced the ingratitude of the great, as you well know. It is true, replied D'Artagnan, yet the great sometimes repent of their ingratitude. In that case it would be quite another thing. Come, let's be merciful to every sinner. Besides, you are right in another respect, which is in thinking that if we were to meddle in politics there could not be a better time than the present. How can you know that, you who never interest yourself in politics? Ah, without caring about them myself. I live among those who are much occupied in them. Poet as I am intimate with Sarrazin, who is devoted to the Prince de Conti, and with Monsieur de Bois Robert, who, since the death of Cardinal Richelieu, is of all parties or any party, so that political discussions have not altogether been uninteresting to me. I have no doubt of it, said D'Artagnan. Now, my dear friend, look upon all I tell you as merely the statement of a monk, of a man who resembles an echo, repeating simply what he hears. I understand that Mazarin is at this very moment extremely uneasy as to the state of affairs, that his orders are not respected like those of our former bugbear, the deceased cardinal, whose portrait, as you see, hangs over there, for whatever may be thought of him, it must be allowed that Richelieu was great. I will not contradict you there, said D'Artagnan. My first impressions were favorable to the minister. I said to myself that a minister is never loved, but that with the genius this one was said to have he would eventually triumph over his enemies and would make himself feared, which in my opinion is much more to be desired than to be loved. D'Artagnan made a sign with his head which indicated that he entirely approved that doubtful maxim. This, then, continued Aramis, was my first opinion, but as I am very ignorant in matters of this kind, and as the humility which I profess obliges me not to rest on my own judgment, but to ask the opinion of others, I have inquired. My friend Aramis paused. Well, what? Asked his friend. Well, I must mortify myself. I must confess that I was mistaken. Monsieur de Mazarin is not a man of genius, as I thought. He is a man of no origin, once a servant of Cardinal Bentivoglio, and he got on by intrigue. He is an upstart, a man of no name, who will only be the tool of a party in France. He will amass wealth, he will injure the king's revenue and pay to himself the pensions which Richelieu paid to others. He is neither a gentleman in manner nor in feeling, but a sort of buffoon, a punchinello, a pantaloon. Do you know him? I do not. Hem, said D'Artagnan. There is some truth in what you say. Ah, it fills me with pride to find that, thanks to a common sort of penetration with which I am endowed, I am approved by a man like you, fresh from the court. But you speak of him, not of his party, his resources. It is true, the queen is for him, something in his favor, but he will never have the king. A mere child, a child who will be of age in 4 years. Then he has neither the parliament nor the people with him. They represent the wealth of the country, nor the nobles nor the princes, who are the military power of France. D'Artagnan scratched his ear. He was forced to confess to himself that this reasoning was not only comprehensive, but just. You see, my poor friend, that I am sometimes bereft of my ordinary thoughtfulness. Perhaps I am wrong in speaking thus to you, who have evidently a leaning to Mazarin. I, cried D'Artagnan, not in the least. You spoke of omission. Did I? I was wrong then. No, I said what you say. There is a crisis at hand. Well, let's fly the feather before the wind. Let us join with that side to which the wind will carry it and resume our adventurous life. We were once 4 valiant knights, 4 hearts fondly united. Let us unite again, not our hearts, which have never been severed, but our courage and our fortunes. Here's a good opportunity for getting something better than a diamond. You are right, D'Artagnan. I held a similar project, but as I had not nor ever shall have your fruitful, vigorous imagination, the idea was suggested to me. Everyone nowadays wants auxiliaries. Propositions have been made to me, and I confess to you frankly that the coadjutor has made me speak out. Monsieur de Gondi, the cardinal's enemy? No, the king's friend, said Aramis. The king's friend, you understand. Well, it is a question of serving the king, the gentleman's duty. But the king is with Mazarin. He is, but not willingly, in appearance, not heart. And that is exactly the snare the king's enemies are preparing for the poor child. Ah, but this is truly civil war which you propose to me, dear Aramis. War for the king. Yet the king will be at the head of the army on Mazarin's side, but his heart will be in the army commanded by the Duc de Beaufort. Monsieur de Beaufort? He is at Vincennes. Did I say Monsieur de Beaufort? Monsieur de Beaufort or another? Monsieur de Beaufort or Monsieur le Prince? but Monsieur le Prince is to set out for the army. He is entirely devoted to the cardinal. Oh, oh, said Aramis, there are questions between them at this very moment. And besides, if it is not the prince, then Monsieur de Gondy. But Monsieur de Gondy is to be made a cardinal. They are soliciting the hat for him. And are there no cardinals that can fight? Come now, recall the 4 cardinals that at the head of armies have equalled Monsieur de Guibriant and Monsieur de Gascon. But a humpbacked general, under the cuirass the hump will not be seen. Besides, remember that Alexandre was lame and Hannibal had but one eye. Do you see any great advantage in adhering to this party? Asked D'Artagnan. I foresee in it the aid of powerful princes, with the enmity of the government, counteracted by parliament and insurrections. That may be done, if they can separate the king from his mother. That may be done, said Aramis. Never, cried D'Artagnan. You, Aramis, know Anne of Austria better than I do. Do you think she will ever forget that her son is her safeguard, her shield, the pledge for her dignity, for her fortune, and her life? Should she forsake Mazarin, she must join her son and go over to the prince's side. But you know better than I do that there are certain reasons why she can never abandon Mazarin. Perhaps you are right, said Aramis, thoughtfully. Therefore I shall not pledge myself. To them or to us, do you mean, Aramis? To no one. I am a priest, resumed Aramis. What have I to do with politics? I am not obliged to read any breviary. I have a jolly little circle of witty abs and pretty women. Everything goes on smoothly, so certainly, dear friend, I shall not meddle in politics. Well, listen, my dear Aramis, said D'Artagnan. Your philosophy convinces me, on my honor. I don't know what devil of an insect stung me and made me ambitious. I have a post by which I live. At the death of Monsieur de T'Arville, who is old, I may be a captain, which is a very snug berth for a once penniless Gascon. Instead of running after adventures, I shall accept an invitation from Porthos. I shall go and shoot on his estate. You know he has estates, Porthos? I should think so, truly. 10 leagues of wood, of marshland, and valleys. He is lord of the hill and the plain, and is now carrying on a suit for his feudal rights against the Bishop of Noyon. Good, said D'Artagnan to himself. That's what I wanted to know. Porthos is in Picardy. Then aloud, and he has taken his ancient name of Vallon, to which he adds that of Bressa, an estate which has been a barony, by my troth. So that Porthos will be a baron. I don't doubt it. The Baroness Porthos will sound particularly charming. And the 2 friends began to laugh. So, D'Artagnan resumed, you will not become a partisan of Mazarin's, nor you of the Prince de Conde? No, let us belong to no party, but remain friends. Let us be neither cardinalists nor Frondists. Adieu, then. And D'Artagnan poured out a glass of wine. To old times, he said. Yes, returned Aramis. Unhappily, those times are past. Nonsense. They will return, said D'Artagnan. At all events, if you want me, remember the Rue Tiquetonne, Hotel de la Chevrette, and I shall be at the convent of Jesuits, from 6 in the morning to 8 at night. Come by the door. From 8 in the evening until 6 in the morning. Come in by the window. Adieu, dear friend. Oh, I can't let you go so. I will go with you. And he took his sword and cloak. He wants to be sure that I go away, said D'Artagnan to himself. Aramis whistled for Bazin, but Bazin was asleep in the antechamber, and Aramis was obliged to shake him by the ear to awake him. Bazin stretched his arms, rubbed his eyes, and tried to go to sleep again. Come, come, sleepy head, quick, the ladder. But, said Bazin, yawning portentously, the ladder is still at the window. The other one, the gardener's. Didn't you see that Monsieur D'Artagnan mounted with difficulty? It will be evening more difficult to descend. D'Artagnan was about to assure Aramis that he could descend easily, when an idea came into his head which silenced him. Bazin uttered a profound sigh and went out to look for the ladder. Soon a good, solid, wooden ladder was placed against the window. Now then, said D'Artagnan, this is something like. This is a means of communication. A woman could go up a ladder like that. Aramis's searching look seemed to seek his friend's thought evening at the bottom of his heart, but D'Artagnan sustained the inquisition with an air of admirable simplicity. Besides, at that moment he put his foot on the first step of the ladder and began his descent. In a moment he was on the ground. Bazin remained at the window. "Stay there," said Aramis. "I shall return immediately." The two friends went toward the shed. At their approach Planchet came out leading the two horses. "That is good to see," said Aramis. "There is a servant active and vigilant, not like that lazy fellow Bazin, who is no longer good for anything since he became connected with the church. Follow us, Planchet. We shall continue our conversation to the end of the village." They traversed the width of the village, talking of indifferent things. Then, as they reached the last houses, "Go, then, dear friend," said Aramis, "follow your own career. Fortune lavishes her smiles upon you. Do not let her flee from your embrace. As for me, I remain in my humility and indolence. Adieu." "Thus it is quite decided," said D'Artagnan, "that what I have to offer to you does not tempt you?" "On the contrary, it would tempt me were I any other man," rejoined Aramis, "but I repeat, I am made up of contradictions. What I hate today I adore tomorrow, and vice versa. You see that I cannot, like you, for instance, settle on any fixed plan." "You least subtile one," said D'Artagnan to himself. "You alone, on the contrary, knowest how to choose your object and to gain it stealthily." The friends embraced. They descended into the plain by the ladder. Planchet met them hard by the shed. D'Artagnan jumped into the saddle. Then the old companions in arms again shook hands. D'Artagnan and Planchet spurred their steeds and took the road to Paris. But after he had gone about 200 steps, D'Artagnan stopped short, alighted, threw the bridle of his horse over the arm of Planchet, and took the pistols from his saddlebow to fasten them to his girdle. "What's the matter?" asked Planchet. "This is the matter. Be he ever so cunning, he shall never say I was his dupe. Stand here, don't stir. Turn your back to the road and wait for me." Having thus spoken, D'Artagnan cleared the ditch by the roadside and crossed the plain so as to wind around the village. He had observed between the house that Madame de Longueville inhabited and the convent of the Jesuits an open space surrounded by a hedge. The moon had now risen and he could see well enough to retrace his road. He reached the hedge and hid himself behind it. In passing by the house where the scene which we have related took place, he remarked that the window was again lighted up, and he was convinced that Aramis had not yet returned to his own apartment, and that when he did it would not be alone. In truth, in a few minutes he heard steps approaching and low whispers. Close to the hedge the steps stopped. D'Artagnan knelt down near the thickest part of the hedge. Two men, to the astonishment of D'Artagnan, appeared shortly. Soon, however, his surprise vanished, for he heard the murmurs of a soft, harmonious voice. One of these two men was a woman disguised as a cavalier. "Come yourself, dear Renée," said the soft voice. "The same thing will never happen again. I have discovered a sort of subterranean passage which runs beneath the street, and we shall only have to raise one of the marble slabs before the door to open you an entrance and an outlet." "Oh," answered another voice, which D'Artagnan instantly recognized as that of Aramis. "I swear to you, princess, that if your reputation did not depend on precautions, and if my life alone were jeopardized—" "Yes, yes, I know you are as brave and venturesome as any man in the world, but you do not belong to me alone. You belong to all our party. Be prudent, sensible." "I always obey, madam, when I am commanded by so gentle a voice." He kissed her hand tenderly. "Ah!" exclaimed the cavalier with a soft voice. "What's the matter?" asked Aramis. "Do you not see that the wind has blown off my hat?" Aramis rushed after the fugitive hat. D'Artagnan took advantage of the circumstance to find a place in the hedge not so thick, where his glance could penetrate to the supposed cavalier. At that instant, the moon, inquisitive, perhaps, like D'Artagnan, came from behind a cloud, and by her light D'Artagnan recognized the large blue eyes, the golden hair, and the classic head of the Duchesse de Longueville. Aramis returned, laughing, one hat on his head and the other in his hand, and he and his companion resumed their walk toward the convent. Chapter 10. Monsieur Porthos du Vallon de Bracia de Pierrefonds. Thanks to what Aramis had told him, D'Artagnan, who knew already that Porthos called himself du Vallon, was now aware that he styled himself, from his estate, de Bracia, and that he was, on account of this estate, engaged in a lawsuit with the Bishop of Noyon. It was, then, in the neighborhood of Noyon that he must seek that estate. His itinerary was promptly determined. He would go to Dammartin, from which place two roads diverge, one toward Soissons, the other toward Compiègne. There he would inquire concerning the Bracia estate and go to the right or to the left according to the information obtained. Planchet, who was still a little concerned for his safety after his recent escapade, declared that he would follow D'Artagnan evening to the end of the world, either by the road to the right or by that to the left. Only he begged his former master to set out in the evening, for greater security to himself. D'Artagnan suggested that he should send word to his wife, so that she may not be anxious about him, but Planchet replied with much sagacity that he was very sure his wife would not die of anxiety through not knowing where he was, while he, Planchet, remembering her incontinence of tongue, would die of anxiety if she did know. This reasoning seemed to D'Artagnan so satisfactory that he no further insisted, and about 8 o'clock in the evening, the time when the vapors of night begin to thicken in the streets, he left the Hôtel de la Chevrette, and followed by Planchet set forth from the capital by way of the Saint Denis Gate. At midnight the two travelers were at Dammartin, but it was then too late to make inquiries. The host of the Cygne de la Croix had gone to bed. The next morning D'Artagnan summoned the host, one of those sly Normans, who say neither yes nor no and fear to commit themselves by giving a direct answer. D'Artagnan, however, gathered from his equivocal replies that the road to the right was the one he ought to take, and on that uncertain information he resumed his journey. At 9 in the morning he reached Nanteuil and stopped for breakfast. His host here was a good fellow from Picardy, who gave him all the information he needed. The Bracia estate was a few leagues from Villers-Cotterets. D'Artagnan was acquainted with Villers-Cotterets, having gone there with the court on several occasions, for at that time Villers-Cotterets was a royal residence. He therefore shaped his course toward that place and dismounted at the Dauphin door. There he ascertained that the Bracia estate was 4 leagues distant, but that Porthos was not at Bracia. Porthos had, in fact, been involved in a dispute with the Bishop of Noyon in regard to the Pierrefonds property, which adjoined his own, and weary at length of a legal controversy which was beyond his comprehension, he put an end to it by purchasing Pierrefonds and added that name to his others. He now called himself du Vallon de Bracia de Pierrefonds, and resided on his new estate. The travelers were therefore obliged to stay at the hotel until the next day. The horses had done 10 leagues that day and needed rest. It is true they may have taken others, but there was a great forest to pass through, and Planchet, as we have seen, had no liking for forests after dark. There was another thing that Planchet had no liking for, and that was starting on a journey with a hungry stomach. Accordingly, D'Artagnan, on awaking, found his breakfast waiting for him. It need not be said that Planchet, in resuming his former functions, resumed also his former humility, and was not ashamed to make his breakfast on what was left by D'Artagnan. It was nearly 8 o'clock when they set out again. Their course was clearly defined. They were to follow the road toward Compiègne, and on emerging from the forest turn to the right. The morning was beautiful, and in this early springtime the birds sang on the trees and the sunbeams shone through the misty glades like curtains of golden gauze. In other parts of the forest the light could scarcely penetrate through the foliage, and the stems of 2 old oak trees, the refuge of the squirrel, startled by the travelers, were in deep shadow. There came up from all nature in the dawn of day a perfume of herbs, flowers, and leaves, which delighted the heart. D'Artagnan, sick of the closeness of Paris, thought that when a man had 3 names of his different estates join one to another, he ought to be very happy in such a paradise. Then he shook his head, saying, "If I were Porthos and D'Artagnan came to make me such a proposition as I am going to make to him, I know what I should say to it." As to Planchet, he thought of little or nothing, but was happy as a hunting hound in his old master's company. At the extremity of the wood D'Artagnan perceived the road. that had been described to him, and at the end of the road he saw the towers of an immense feudal castle. Oh, he said, I fancied this castle belonged to the ancient branch of Orleans. Can Porthos have negotiated for it with the Duc de Longueville? Faith, exclaimed Planchet, here's land in good condition. If it belongs to Monsieur Porthos, I wish him joy. Sounds, cried D'Artagnan. Don't call him Porthos, nor Evening Vallon. Call him de Bracia or de Pierrefonds. You will null out damnation to my mission otherwise. As he approached the castle which had first attracted his eye, D'Artagnan was convinced that it could not be there that his friend dwelt. The towers, though solid and as if built yesterday, were open and broken. One may have fancied that some giant had cleaved them with blows from a hatchet. On arriving at the extremity of the castle, D'Artagnan found himself overlooking a beautiful valley, in which, at the foot of a charming little lake, stood several scattered houses, which, humble in their aspect and covered, some with tiles, others with thatch, seemed to acknowledge as their sovereign lord a pretty ch-do, built about the beginning of the reign of Henry Roman IV and surmounted by 4 stately, gilded weathercocks. D'Artagnan no longer doubted that this was Porthos's pleasant dwelling place. The road led straight up to the ch-do which, compared to its ancestor on the hill, was exactly what a fop of the coterie of the Duc d'Enghien would have been beside a knight in steel armor in the time of Charles Roman VII. D'Artagnan spurred his horse on and pursued his road, followed by Planchet at the same pace. In 10 minutes D'Artagnan reached the end of an alley regularly planted with fine poplars, and terminating in an iron gate, the points and crossed bars of which were gilt. In the mid of this avenue was a nobleman, dressed in green and with as much gilding about him as the iron gate, riding on a tall horse. On his right hand and his left were 2 footmen, with the seams of their dresses laced. A considerable number of clowns were assembled and rendered homage to their lord. Ah, said D'Artagnan to himself, can this be the Seigneur du Vallon de Bracia de Pierrefonds? Well a day, how he has shrunk since he gave up the name of Porthos. This cannot be Monsieur Porthos, observed Planchet, replying, as it were, to his master's thoughts. Monsieur Porthos was 6 feet high. This man is scarcely 5. Nevertheless, said D'Artagnan, the people are bowing very low to this person. As he spoke, he rode toward the tall horse, to the man of importance and his valets. As he approached, he seemed to recognize the features of this individual. Jesu, cried Planchet, can it be? At this exclamation the man on horseback turned slowly and with a lofty air, and the 2 travelers could see, displayed in all their brilliancy, the large eyes, the vermilion visage, and the eloquent smile of Mousqueton. It was truly Mousqueton, as fat as a pig, rolling about with rude health, puffed out with good living, who, recognizing D'Artagnan and acting very differently from the hypocrite Bazin, slipped off his horse and approached the officer with his hat off, so that the homage of the assembled crowd was turned toward this new sun, which eclipsed the former luminary. Monsieur D'Artagnan, cried Mousqueton, his fat cheeks swelling out, and his whole frame perspiring with joy. Monsieur D'Artagnan. Oh, what joy for my lord and master, du Vallon de Bracia de Pierrefonds. You good Mousqueton, where is your master? You stand upon his property, but how handsome you are, how fat. You have prospered and grown stout. And D'Artagnan could not restrain his astonishment at the change good fortune had produced on the once famished one. Hey, yes, thank God, I am pretty well, said Mousqueton. But have you nothing to say to your friend Planchet? How, my friend Planchet? Planchet, are you there? Cried Mousqueton, with open arms and eyes full of tears. My very self, replied Planchet. But I wanted first to see if you were grown proud. Proud toward an old friend? Never, Planchet. You wouldst not have thought so hadst you known Mousqueton well. So far so well, answered Planchet, alighting, and extending his arms to Mousqueton. The 2 servants embraced with an emotion which touched those who were present and made them suppose that Planchet was a great lord in disguise. So highly did they estimate the position of Mousqueton. And now, sir, resumed Mousqueton, when he had rid himself of Planchet, who had in vain tried to clasp his hands behind his friend's fat back, now, sir, allow me to leave you, for I could not permit my master to hear of your arrival from any but myself. He would never forgive me for not having preceded you. This dear friend, said D'Artagnan, carefully avoiding to utter either the former name borne by Porthos or his new one. Then he has not forgotten me. Forgotten, he, cried Mousqueton. There's not a day, sir, that we don't expect to hear that you were made marshal either instead of Monsieur de Gascon or of Monsieur de Bassompierre. On D'Artagnan's lips there played one of those rare and melancholy smiles which seemed to emanate from the depth of his soul, the last trace of youth and happiness that had survived life's disillusions. And you, fellows, resumed Mousqueton, stay near Monsieur le Comte d'Artagnan and pay him every attention in your power whilst I go to prepare my lord for his visit. And mounting his horse Mousqueton rode off down the avenue on the grass at a hand gallop. Ah, there's something promising, said D'Artagnan. No mysteries, no cloak to hide oneself in, no cunning policy here. People laugh outright. They weep for joy here. I see nothing but faces a yard broad. In short, it seems to me that nature herself wears a holiday garb, and that the trees, instead of leaves and flowers, are covered with red and green ribbons as on gala days. As for me, said Planchet, I seem to smell, from this place, evening, a most delectable perfume of fine roast meat, and to see the scullions in a row by the hedge hailing our approach. Ah, sir, what a cook must Monsieur Pierrefonds have, when he was so fond of eating and drinking, evening whilst he was only called Monsieur Porthos. Say no more, cried D'Artagnan. Chapter 11. Wealth does not necessarily produce happiness. D'Artagnan passed through the iron gate and arrived in front of the chateau. He alighted as he saw a species of giant on the steps. Let us do justice to D'Artagnan. Independently of every selfish wish, his heart palpitated with joy when he saw that tall form and martial demeanor, which recalled to him a good and brave man. He ran to Porthos and threw himself into his arms. The whole body of servants, arranged in a semicircle at a respectful distance, looked on with humble curiosity. Mousqueton, at the head of them, wiped his eyes. Porthos linked his arm in that of his friend. "Ah, how delightful to see you again, dear friend," he cried, in a voice which was now changed from a baritone into a bass. "You've not then forgotten me." "Forget you? Oh, dear Du Vallon, does one forget the happiest days of flowery youth, one's dearest friends, the dangers we have dared together? On the contrary, there is not an hour we have passed together that is not present to my memory." Yes, yes, said Porthos, trying to give to his mustache a curl which it had lost whilst he had been alone. Yes, we did some fine things in our time, and we gave that poor cardinal a few threads to unravel. And he heaved a sigh. Under any circumstances, he resumed, you are welcome, my dear friend. You will help me to recover my spirits. Tomorrow we will hunt the hare on my plain, which is a superb tract of land, or pursue the deer in my woods, which are magnificent. I have 4 harriers which are considered the swiftest in the county, and a pack of hounds which are unequaled for 20 leagues around. And Porthos heaved another sigh. But first, interposed D'Artagnan, you must present me to Madame du Vallon. A third sigh from Porthos. I lost Madame du Vallon 2 years ago, he said, and you find me still in affliction on that account. That was the reason why I left my chateau du Vallon near Corbeil and came to my estate, Braceau. Poor Madame du Vallon, her temper was uncertain, but she came at last to accustom herself to my little ways and understand my little wishes. So you are free now, and rich? Alas, groaned Porthos, I am a widower and have 40,000 francs a year. Let us go to breakfast. I shall be happy to do so. The morning air has made me hungry. Yes, said Porthos, my air is excellent. They went into the chateau. There was nothing but gilding, high and low. The cornices were gilt, the mouldings were gilt, the legs and arms of the chairs were gilt. A table, ready set out, awaited them. You see, said Porthos, this is my usual style. Devil take me, answered D'Artagnan, I wish you joy of it. The king has nothing like it. No, answered Porthos. I hear it said that he is very badly fed by the Cardinal, Monsieur de Mazarin. Taste this cutlet, my dear D'Artagnan. It is off one of my sheep. You have very tender mutton, and I wish you joy of it, said D'Artagnan. Yes, the sheep are fed in my meadows, which are excellent pasture. Give me another cutlet. No, try this hare, which I had killed yesterday in one of my warrens. Sounds, what a flavor, cried D'Artagnan. Ah, they are fed on time only, your hares. And how do you like my wine? Asked Porthos. It is pleasant, isn't it? Capital. It is nothing, however, but a wine of the country. Really? Yes, a small declivity to the south, over there on my hill, gives me 20 hogsheads, quite a vineyard, hey? Porthos sighed for the 5th time. D'Artagnan had counted his sighs. He became curious to solve the problem. Well now, he said, it seems, my dear friend, that something vexes you. You are ill, perhaps. That health, which, excellent, my dear friend, better than ever. I could kill an ox with a blow of my fist. Well, then, family affairs, perhaps. Family, I have, happily, only myself in the world to care for. But what makes you sigh? My dear fellow, replied Porthos, to be candid with you, I am not happy. You are not happy, Porthos? You who have chdo, meadows, mountains, woods, you who have 40,000 francs a year, you are not happy. My dear friend, all those things I have, but I am a hermit in the amid of superfluity, surrounded, I suppose, only by clodhoppers, with whom you could not associate. Porthos turned rather pale and drank off a large glass of wine. No, but just think, there are paltry country squires who have all some title or another and pretend to go back as far as Charlemagne, or at least to Hugh Capet. When I first came here, being the last comer, it was for me to make the first advances. I made them, but you know, my dear friend, Madame du Vallon, Porthos, in pronouncing these words, seemed to gulp down something. Madame du Vallon was of doubtful gentility. She had, in her first marriage, I don't think, D'Artagnan, I am telling you anything new, married a lawyer. They thought that Gnosis, you can understand that's a word bad enough to make one kill 30,000 men. I have killed two, which has made people hold their tongues, but has not made me their friend, so that I have no society. I live alone. I am sick of it. My mind preys on itself. D'Artagnan smiled. He now saw where the breastplate was weak, and prepared the blow. But now, he said, that you are a widower, your wife's connection cannot injure you. Yes, but understand me, not being of a race of historic fame, like the de Courcys, who were content to be plain sirs, or the Rohans, who didn't wish to be dukes. All these people, who are all either vicomtes or counts, go before me at church in all the ceremonies, and I can say nothing to them. Ah, if I only were a baron, don't you mean? Cried D'Artagnan, finishing his friend's sentence. Ah, cried Porthos, would I were but a baron. Well, my friend, I'm come to give you this very title which you wish for so much. Porthos gave a start that shook the room. 2 or 3 bottles fell and were broken. Mousqueton ran there, hearing the noise. Porthos waved his hand to Mousqueton to pick up the bottles. I am glad to see, said D'Artagnan, that you have still that honest lad with you. He is my steward, replied Porthos. He will never leave me. Go away now, Mouston. So he's called Mouston, thought D'Artagnan. It is too long a word to pronounce Mousqueton. Well, he said aloud, let us resume our conversation later. Your people may suspect something. There may be spies about. You can suppose, Porthos, that what I have to say relates to most important matters. Devil take them. Let us walk in the park, answered Porthos, for the sake of digestion. Egad, said D'Artagnan, the park is like everything else, and there are as many fish in your pond as rabbits in your warren. You are a happy man, my friend, since you have not only retained your love of the chase, but acquired that of fishing. My friend, replied Porthos, I leave fishing to Mousqueton. It is a vulgar pleasure, but I shoot sometimes, that is to say, when I am dull, and I sit on one of those marble seats, have my gun brought to me, my favorite dog, and I shoot rabbits. Really? how very amusing. Yes, replied Porthos with a sigh, it is amusing. D'Artagnan now no longer counted the sighs. They were innumerable. However, what had you to say to me? He resumed. Let us return to that subject. With pleasure, replied D'Artagnan. I must, however, first frankly tell you that you must change your mode of life. How? Go into harness again, gird on your sword, run after adventures, and leave as in old times a little of your fat on the roadside. Ah, hang it, said Porthos. I see you are spoiled. Dear friend, you are corpulent, your arm has no longer that movement of which the late cardinal's guards have so many proofs. Ah, my fist is strong enough, I swear, cried Porthos, extending a hand like a shoulder of mutton. So much the better. Are we then to go to war? By my troth, yes. Against whom? Are you a politician, friend? Not in the least. Are you for Mazarin or for the princes? I am for no one. That is to say, you are for us. Well, I tell you that I come to you from the cardinal. This speech was heard by Porthos in the same sense as if it had still been in the year 1640 and related to the true cardinal. Ho, ho, what are the wishes of his eminence? He wishes to have you in his service. And who spoke to him of me? Rochefort, you remember him? Yes, part02. It was he who gave us so much trouble and kept us on the road so much. You gave him 3 sword wounds in 3 separate engagements. But you know he is now our friend? No, I didn't know that. So he cherishes no resentment? You are mistaken, Porthos, said D'Artagnan. It is I who cherish no resentment. Porthos didn't understand any too clearly, but then we know that understanding was not his strong point. You say, then, he continued, that the Count de Rochefort spoke of me to the cardinal. Yes, and the queen, too. The queen, do you say? To inspire us with confidence, she has evening placed in Mazarin's hands that famous diamond, you remember all about it, that I once sold to Monsieur des Essarts, and of which, I don't know how, she has regained possession. But it seems to me, said Porthos, that she would have done much better if she had given it back to you. So I think, replied D'Artagnan, but kings and queens are strange beings and have odd fancies, nevertheless, since they are the ones who have riches and honors. We are devoted to them. Yes, we are devoted to them, repeated Porthos. And you? To whom are you devoted now? To the king, the queen, and to the cardinal. Moreover, I have answered for your devotion also. And you say that you have made certain conditions on my behalf? Magnificent, my dear fellow, magnificent. In the first place, you have plenty of money, haven't you? 40,000 francs income, I think you said. Porthos began to be suspicious. My friend, said he, one never has too much money. Madame du Vallon left things in much disorder. I am not much of a hand at figures, so that I live almost from hand to mouth. He is afraid I have come to borrow money, thought D'Artagnan. Ah, my friend, said he, it is all the better if you are in difficulties. How is it all the better? Yes, for his eminence will give you all that you want, land, money, and titles. Ah, said Porthos, opening his eyes at that last word. Under the other cardinal, continued D'Artagnan, we didn't know enough to make our profits. This, however, doesn't concern you. With your 40,000 francs income, the happiest man in the world, it seems to me. Porthos sighed. At the same time, continued D'Artagnan, notwithstanding your 40,000 francs a year, and perhaps evening for the very reason that you have 40,000 francs a year, it seems to me that a little coronet would do well on your carriage, hey? Yes, truly, said Porthos. Well, my dear friend, win it. It is at the point of your sword. We shall not interfere with each other. Your object is a title, mine, money. If I can get enough to rebuild Artagnan, which my ancestors, impoverished by the Crusades, allowed to fall into ruins, and to buy 30 acres of land about it, that is all I wish. I shall retire and die tranquilly at home. For my part, said Porthos, I desire to be made a baron. You shall be one. And have you not seen any of our other friends? Yes, I have seen Aramis. And what does he wish? To be a bishop, Aramis, answered D'Artagnan, who did not wish to undeceive Porthos. Aramis, fancy, has become a monk and a Jesuit, and lives like a bear. My offers did not arouse him, did not evening tempt him. So much the worse. He was a clever man. And Athos, I have not yet seen him. Do you know where I shall find him? Near Blois. He is called Bragelonne. Only imagine, my dear friend, Athos, who was of as high birth as the emperor and who inherits one estate which gives him the title of Comte. What is he to do with all those dignities, the Comte de Laffrey, Comte de Bragelonne? And he has no children with all these titles. Ah, said Porthos, I have heard that he had adopted a young man who resembles him greatly. What, Athos? Our Athos, who was as virtuous as Scipio? Have you seen him? No. Well, I shall see him tomorrow and tell him about you. But I'm afraid, entre nous, that his liking for wine has aged and degraded him. Yes, he used to drink a great deal, replied Porthos. And then he was older than any of us, added D'Artagnan. Some years only. His gravity made him look older than he was. Well then, if we can get Athos, all will be well. If we cannot, we will do without him. We two are worth a dozen. Yes, said Porthos, smiling at the remembrance of his former exploits, but we four, altogether, would be equal to 36, more especially as you say the work will not be child's play. Will it last long? By'r Lady, 2 or 3 years perhaps. So much the better, cried Porthos. You have no idea, my friend, how my bones ache since I came here. Sometimes on a Sunday, I take a ride in the fields and on the property of my neighbors in order to pick up a nice little quarrel, which I am really in want of, but nothing happens. Either they respect or they fear me, which is more likely, but they let me trample down the clover with my dogs, insult and obstruct every one, and I come back still more weary and low-spirited. That's all. At any rate, tell me, there's more chance of fighting in Paris, is there not? In that respect, my dear friend, it's delightful. No more edicts, no more of the cardinal's guards, no more de Jussacs, nor other bloodhounds. I'gad, underneath a lamp in an inn, anywhere, they ask, are you one of the Fronde? They unsheathe, and that's all that is said. The Duc de Guise killed Monsieur de Coligny in the Place Royale, and nothing was said of it. Ah, things go on gaily, then, said Porthos. Besides which, in a short time, resumed D'Artagnan, we shall have set battles, cannonades, conflagrations, and there will be great variety. Well, then, I decide. I have your word, then? Yes, it is given. Chapter 12. Porthos was discontented with his condition. As they returned toward the castle, D'Artagnan thought of the miseries of poor human nature, always dissatisfied with what it has, ever desirous of what it has not. In the position of Porthos, D'Artagnan would have been perfectly happy, and to make Porthos contented there was wanting, what? 5 letters to put before his 3 names, a tiny coronet to paint upon the panels of his carriage. I shall pass all my life, thought D'Artagnan, in seeking for a man who is really contented with his lot. Whilst making this reflection, chance seemed, as it were, to give him the lie direct. When Porthos had left him to give some orders, he saw Mousqueton approaching. The face of the steward, despite one slight shade of care, light as a summer cloud, seemed the physiognomy of absolute felicity. Here is what I am looking for, thought D'Artagnan. But alas, the poor fellow does not know the purpose for which I am here. He then made a sign for Mousqueton to come to him. Sir, said the servant, I have a favor to ask you. Speak out, my friend. I am afraid to do so. Perhaps you will think, sir, that prosperity has spoiled me. Are you happy, friend? Asked D'Artagnan. As happy as possible, and yet, sir, you may make me even happier than I am. Well, speak, if it depends on me. Oh, sir, it depends on you only. I listen. I am waiting to hear, sir. The favor I have to ask of you is not to call me Mousqueton but Mouston. Since I have had the honor of being my lord's steward, I have taken the last name as more dignified and calculated to make my inferiors respect me. You, sir, know how necessary subordination is in any large establishment of servants. D'Artagnan smiled. Porthos wanted to lengthen out his names, Mousqueton to cut his short. Well, my dear Mouston, he said, rest satisfied. I will call you Mouston, and if it makes you happy I will not tutor you any longer. Oh, cried Mousqueton, reddening with joy, if you do me, sir, such honor, I shall be grateful all my life. It is too much to ask. Alas, thought D'Artagnan, it is very little to offset the unexpected tribulations I am bringing to this poor devil who has so warmly welcomed me. Will monsieur remain long with us? Asked Mousqueton, with a serene and glowing countenance. I go tomorrow, my friend, replied D'Artagnan. Ah, monsieur, said Mousqueton, then you have come here only to awaken our regrets. I fear that is true, said D'Artagnan, in a low tone. D'Artagnan was secretly touched with remorse, not at inducing Porthos to enter into schemes in which his life and fortune would be in jeopardy, for Porthos, in the title of Baron, had his object and reward. But poor Mousqueton, whose only wish was to be called Mouston, was it not cruel to snatch him from the delightful state of peace and plenty in which he was? He was thinking of these matters when Porthos summoned him to dinner. What, to dinner? Said D'Artagnan. What time is it, then? Why, it is after 1 o'clock. Your home is a paradise, Porthos. One takes no note of time. I follow you, though I am not hungry. Come, if one can't always eat, one can always drink, a maxim of poor Athos, the truth of which I have discovered since I began to be lonely. D'Artagnan, who as a Gascon was inclined to sobriety, seemed not so sure as his friend of the truth of Athos's maxim, but he did his best to keep up with his host. Meanwhile his misgivings in regard to Mousqueton recurred to his mind, and with greater force because Mousqueton, though he did not himself wait on the table, which would have been beneath him in his new position, appeared at the door from time to time, and evinced his gratitude to D'Artagnan by the quality of the wine he directed to be served. Therefore, when, at dessert, upon a sign from D'Artagnan, Porthos had sent away his servants and the two friends were alone. Porthos, said D'Artagnan, who will attend you in your campaigns? Why, replied Porthos, Mouston, of course. This was a blow to D'Artagnan. He could already see the intendant's beaming smile change to a contortion of grief. But, he said, Mouston is not so young as he was, my dear fellow. Besides, he has grown fat and perhaps has lost his fitness for active service. That may be true, replied Porthos, but I am used to him, and besides, he wouldn't be willing to let me go without him. He loves me so much. Oh, blind self-love, thought D'Artagnan. And you? Asked Porthos, haven't you still in your service your old lackey, that good, that brave, that intelligent, what, then, is his name? Planchet. Yes, I have found him again, but he is lackey no longer. What is he, then? With his 1,600 francs, you remember, the 1,600 francs he earned at the siege of La Rochelle by carrying a letter to Lord de Winter. He has set up a little shop in the Rue des Lombards and is now a confectioner. Ah, he is a confectioner in the Rue des Lombards. How does it happen, then, that he is in your service? He has been guilty of certain escapades and fears he may be disturbed. And the musketeer narrated to his friend Planchet's adventure. Well, said Porthos, if any one had told you in the old times that the day would come when Planchet would rescue Rochefort and that you would protect him in it, I should not have believed him. But men are changed by events. There is nothing truer than that, said Porthos, but what does not change, or changes for the better, is wine. Taste of this. It is a Spanish wine which our friend Athos thought much of. At that moment the steward came in to consult his master upon the proceedings of the next day, and also with regard to the shooting party which had been proposed. Tell me, Mouston, said Porthos, are my arms in good condition? Your arms, my lord. What arms? Sounds. My weapons. What weapons? My military weapons. Yes, my lord. At any rate, I think so. Make sure of it, and if they want it, have them burnished up. Which is my best cavalry horse? Vulcan. And the best hack? Bayard. What horse do you choose for thyself? I like Rostad, my lord. a good animal whose paces suit me. Strong, thinkest you? Half Norman, half Mecklenburger, will go night and day. That will do for us. See to these horses, polish up or make someone else polish my arms. Then take pistols with you and a hunting knife. Are we then going to travel, my lord? Asked Mousqueton, rather uneasy. Something better still, Mouston. An expedition, sir? Asked the steward, whose roses began to change into lilies. We are going to return to the service, Mouston, replied Porthos, still trying to restore his mustache to the military curl it had long lost. Into the service, the king's service. Mousqueton trembled, evening his fat, smooth cheeks shook as he spoke, and he looked at D'Artagnan with an air of reproach. He staggered, and his voice was almost choked. Yes and no, we shall serve in a campaign, seek out all sorts of adventures, return, in short, to our former life. These last words fell on Mousqueton like a thunderbolt. It was those very terrible old days that made the present so excessively delightful, and the blow was so great he rushed out, overcome, and forgot to shut the door. The two friends remained alone to speak of the future and to build castles in the air. The good wine which Mousqueton had placed before them traced out in glowing drops to D'Artagnan a fine perspective, shining with quadruples and pistols, and showed to Porthos a blue ribbon and a ducal mantle. They were, in fact, asleep on the table when the servants came to light them to their bed. Mousqueton was, however, somewhat consoled by D'Artagnan, who the next day told him that in all probability war would always be carried on in the heart of Paris, and within reach of the Château du Vallon, which was near Corbeil, or Braceau, which was near Melun, and of Pierrefonds, which was between Compiègne and Villers-Cotterets. But, formerly, it appears, began Mousqueton timidly. Oh, said D'Artagnan, we don't now make war as we did formerly. Today it's a sort of diplomatic arrangement. Ask Planchet. Mousqueton inquired, therefore, the state of the case of his old friend, who confirmed the statement of D'Artagnan. But, he added, in this war prisoners stand a chance of being hung. The deuce they do, said Mousqueton. I think I should like the siege of Rochelle better than this war. Then, Porthos, meantime, asked D'Artagnan to give him his instructions how to proceed on his journey. 4 days, replied his friend, are necessary to reach Blois, 1 day to rest there, 3 or 4 days to return to Paris. Set out, therefore, in a week, with your suite, and go to the Hôtel de la Chevrette, Rue Tiquetonne, and there await me. That's agreed, said Porthos. As to myself, I shall go around to see Athos, for though I don't think his aid worth much, one must with one's friends observe all due politeness, said D'Artagnan. The friends then took leave of each other on the very border of the estate of Pierrefonds, to which Porthos escorted his friend. At least, D'Artagnan said to himself, as he took the road to Villers-Cotterets, at least I shall not be alone in my undertaking. That devil, Porthos, is a man of prodigious strength. Still, if Athos joins us, well, we shall be 3 of us to laugh at Aramis, that little coxcomb with his too good luck. At Villers-Cotterets he wrote to the cardinal, My lord, I have already 1 man to offer to your eminence, and he is well worth 20 men. I am just setting out for Blois. Chapter 13. 2 Angelic Faces. The road was long, but the horses upon which D'Artagnan and Planchet rode had been refreshed in the well-supplied stables of the Lord of Braceau. The master and servant rode side by side, conversing as they went, for D'Artagnan had by degrees thrown off the master and Planchet had entirely ceased to assume the manners of a servant. He had been raised by circumstances to the rank of a confidant to his master. It was many years since D'Artagnan had opened his heart to any one. It happened, however, that these 2 men, on meeting again, assimilated perfectly. Planchet was in truth no vulgar companion in these new adventures. He was a man of uncommonly sound sense. Without courting danger he never shrank from an encounter. In short, he had been a soldier and arms and noble a man. It was, therefore, on the footing of friends that D'Artagnan and Planchet arrived in the neighborhood of Blois. Going along, D'Artagnan, shaking his head, said, I know that my going to Athos is useless and absurd, but still I owe this courtesy to my old friend, a man who had in him material for the most noble and generous of characters. Oh, Monsieur Athos was a noble gentleman, said Planchet, was he not? Scattering money round about him as heaven sprinkles rain. Do you remember, sir, that duel with the Englishman in the enclosure des Carmes? Ah, how lofty, how magnificent Monsieur Athos was that day, when he said to his adversary, "You have insisted on knowing my name, sir. So much the worse for you, since I shall be obliged to kill you." I was near him. Those were his exact words, when he stabbed his foe as he said he would, and his adversary fell without saying, "Oh, it is a noble gentleman, Monsieur Athos." Yes, true as gospel, said D'Artagnan. But one single fault has swallowed up all these fine qualities. I remember well, said Planchet, he was fond of drinking. In truth, he drank, but not as other men drink. One seemed, as he raised the wine to his lips, to hear him say, "Come, juice of the grape, and chase away my sorrows." And how he used to break the stem of a glass or the neck of a bottle. There was no one like him for that. "And now," replied D'Artagnan, "behold the sad spectacle that awaits us. This noble gentleman with his lofty glance, this handsome cavalier, so brilliant in feats of arms that every one was surprised that he held in his hand a sword only instead of a baton of command. Alas, we shall find him changed into a broken-down old man, with garnet nose and eyes that slobber. We shall find him extended on some lawn, from where he will look at us with a languid eye and peradventure will not recognize us. God knows, Planchet, that I should fly from a sight so sad if I did not wish to show my respect for the illustrious shadow of what was once the Comte de la Fere, whom we loved so much." Planchet shook his head and said nothing. It was evident that he shared his master's apprehensions. "And then," resumed D'Artagnan, "to this decrepitude is probably added poverty, for he must have neglected the little that he had, and the dirty scoundrel, Grimaud, more taciturn than ever and still more drunken than his master. Stay, Planchet, it breaks my heart to merely think of it. I fancy myself there and that I see him staggering and hear him stammering," said Planchet, in a piteous tone, "but at all events we shall soon know the real state of things, for I imagine that those lofty walls, now turning ruby in the setting sun, are the walls of Blois, probably, and those steeples, pointed and sculptured, that we catch a glimpse of over there, are similar to those that I have heard described at Chambord." At this moment one of those heavy wagons, drawn by bullocks, which carry the wood cut in the fine forests of the country to the ports of the Loire, came out of a byroad full of ruts and turned on that which the two horsemen were following. A man carrying a long switch with a nail at the end of it, with which he urged on his slow team, was walking with the cart. "Ho, friend," cried Planchet, "what's your pleasure, gentlemen?" replied the peasant, with a purity of accent peculiar to the people of that district, and which may have put to shame the cultured denizens of the Sorbonne and the Rue de l'Université. "We are looking for the house of Monsieur de la Fere," said D'Artagnan. The peasant took off his hat on hearing this revered name. "Gentlemen," he said, "the wood that I am carting is his. I cut it in his copse and I am taking it to the Ch. D'Artagnan determined not to question this man. He did not wish to hear from another what he had himself said to Planchet. "The Ch. he said to himself. "What Ch. Ah, I understand. Athos is not a man to be thwarted. He, like Porthos, has obliged his peasantry to call him my lord, and to dignify his pettifogging place by the name of Ch. He had a heavy hand, dear old Athos, after drinking." D'Artagnan, after asking the man the right way, continued his route, agitated in spite of himself at the idea of seeing once more that singular man whom he had so truly loved and who had contributed so much by advice and example to his education as a gentleman. He checked by degrees the speed of his horse and went on, his head drooping as if in deep thought. Soon as the road turned, the Ch. de la Valliere appeared in view. Then, a quarter of a mile beyond, a white house, encircled in sycamores, was visible at the farther end of a group of trees, which spring had powdered with a snow of flowers. On beholding this house, D'Artagnan, calm as he was in general, felt an unusual disturbance within his heart, so powerful during the whole course of life are the recollections of youth. He proceeded, nevertheless, and came opposite to an iron gate, ornamented in the taste of the period. Through the gate was seen kitchen gardens, carefully attended to, a spacious courtyard, in which neighed several horses held by valets in various liveries, and a carriage, drawn by 2 horses of the country. "We are mistaken," said D'Artagnan. "This cannot be the establishment of Athos. Good heavens! Suppose he is dead and that this property now belongs to someone who bears his name. Alight, Planchet, and inquire, for I confess that I have scarcely courage so to do." Planchet alighted. "You must add," said D'Artagnan, "that a gentleman who is passing by wishes to have the honor of paying his respects to the Comte de la Fère, and if you are satisfied with what you hearest, then mention my name." Planchet, leading his horse by the bridle, drew near to the gate and rang the bell, and immediately a servant man with white hair and of erect stature, notwithstanding his age, presented himself. "Does Monsieur le Comte de la Fère live here?" asked Planchet. "Yes, monsieur, it is here he lives," the servant replied to Planchet, who was not in livery. "A nobleman retired from service, is he not?" "Yes." "And who had a lackey named Grimaud?" persisted Planchet, who had prudently considered that he couldn't have too much information. "Monsieur Grimaud is absent from the CHO for the time being," said the servitor, who, little used as he was to such inquiries, began to examine Planchet from head to foot. "Then," cried Planchet joyously, "I see well that it is the same Comte de la Fère whom we seek. Be good enough to open to me, for I wish to announce to Monsieur le Comte that my master, one of his friends, is here, and wishes to greet him." "Why didn't you say so?" said the servitor, opening the gate. "But where is your master?" "He is following me." The servitor opened the gate, and walked before Planchet, who made a sign to D'Artagnan. The latter, his heart palpitating more than ever, entered the courtyard without dismounting. Whilst Planchet was standing on the steps before the house, he heard a voice say, "Well, where is this gentleman, and why do they not bring him here?" This voice, the sound of which reached D'Artagnan, reawakened in his heart 1,000 sentiments, 1,000 recollections that he had forgotten. He vaulted hastily from his horse, whilst Planchet, with a smile on his lips, advanced toward the master of the house. "But I know you, my lad," said Athos, appearing on the threshold. "Oh, yes, Monsieur le Comte, you know me and I know you. I am Planchet, whom you know well." But the honest servant could say no more, so much was he overcome by this unexpected interview. "What, Planchet, is Monsieur D'Artagnan here?" "Here I am, my friend, dear Athos," cried D'Artagnan, in a faltering voice and almost staggering from agitation. At these words a visible emotion was expressed on the beautiful countenance and calm features of Athos. He rushed toward D'Artagnan with eyes fixed upon him and clasped him in his arms. D'Artagnan, equally moved, pressed him also closely to him, whilst tears stood in his eyes. Athos then took him by the hand and led him into the drawing-room, where there were several people. Every one arose. "I present to you," he said, "Monsieur le Chevalier d'Artagnan, lieutenant of His Majesty's Musketeers, a devoted friend and one of the most excellent, brave gentlemen that I have ever known." D'Artagnan received the compliments of those who were present in his own way, and whilst the conversation became general he looked earnestly at Athos. Strange! Athos was scarcely aged at all. His fine eyes, no longer surrounded by that dark line which nights of dissipation pencil too infallibly, seemed larger, more liquid than ever. His face, a little elongated, had gained in calm dignity what it had lost in feverish excitement. His hand, always wonderfully beautiful and strong, was set off by a ruffle of lace, like certain hands by Titian and Van Dyck. He was less stiff than formerly. His long, dark hair, softly powdered here and there with silver tendrils, fell elegantly over his shoulders in wavy curls. His voice was still youthful, as if belonging to a Hercules of 25, and his magnificent Tess, which he had preserved white and sound, gave an indescribable charm to his smile. Meanwhile the guests, seeing that the two friends were longing to be alone, prepared to depart, when a noise of dogs barking resounded through the courtyard, and many persons said at the same moment, "Ah, it is Rael, who is come home." Athos, as the name of Rael was pronounced, looked inquisitively at D'Artagnan, in order to see if any curiosity was painted on his face. But D'Artagnan was still in confusion, and turned around almost mechanically when a fine young man of 15 years of age, dressed simply, but in perfect taste, entered the room, raising, as he came, his hat, adorned with a long plume of scarlet feathers. Nevertheless, D'Artagnan was struck by the appearance of this new personage. It seemed to explain to him the change in Athos. A resemblance between the boy and the man explained the mystery of this regenerated existence. He remained listening and gazing. "Here you are, home again, Rael," said the Comte. "Yes, sir," replied the youth, with deep respect, "and I have performed the commission that you gave me." "But what's the matter, Rael?" said Athos, very anxiously. "You are pale and agitated." "Sir," replied the young man, "it is on account of an accident which has happened to our little neighbor." "To Mademoiselle de la Valliere?" asked Athos quickly. "What is it?" cried many persons present. "She was walking with her nurse Marceline in the place where the woodman cut the wood. When, passing on horseback, I stopped. She saw me also, and in trying to jump from the end of a pile of wood on which she had mounted, the poor child fell and was not able to rise again. I fear that she has badly sprained her ankle." "Oh, heavens!" cried Athos. "And her mother, Madame de Saint-Remy, have they yet told her of it?" "No, sir, Madame de Saint-Remy is at Blois with the Duchess of Orleans. I am afraid that what was first done was unskilful, if not worse than useless. I am come, sir, to ask your advice. Send directly to Blois, Rael, or rather, take horse and ride immediately yourself." Rael bowed. "But where is Louise?" asked the Comte. "I have brought her here, sir, and I have deposited her in charge of Charlotte, who, till better advice comes, has bathed the foot in cold well water." The guests now all took leave of Athos, excepting the old Duc de Barbe, who, as an old friend of the family of La Valliere, went to see little Louise and offered to take her to Blois in his carriage. "You are right, sir," said Athos. "She will be the sooner with her mother. As for you, Rael, I am sure it is your fault, some giddiness or folly." "No, sir, I assure you," muttered Rael, "it is not." "Oh, no, no, I declare it is not," cried the young girl, while Rael turned pale at the idea of his being perhaps the cause of her disaster. "Nevertheless, Rael, you must go to Blois, and you must make your excuses and mine to Madame de Saint-Remy." The youth looked pleased. Chapter 14. The Castle of Bragelonne. Whilst this scene was going on, D'Artagnan remained with open mouth and a confused gaze. Everything had turned out so differently from what he expected, that he was stupefied with wonder. Athos, who had been observing him and guessing his thoughts, took his arm and led him into the garden. "Whilst supper is being prepared," he said, smiling, "you will not, my friend, be sorry to have the mystery which so puzzles you cleared up." "True, Monsieur le Comte," replied D'Artagnan, who felt that by degrees Athos was resuming that great influence which aristocracy had over him. Athos smiled. "First and foremost, dear D'Artagnan, we have no title such as Count here. When I call you Chevalier, it is in presenting you to my guests, that they may know who you are. But to you, D'Artagnan, I am, I hope, still dear Athos, your comrade, your friend. Do you intend to stand on ceremony because you are less attached to me than you were? Oh, God forbid! Then let us be as we used to be. Let us be open with each other. You are surprised at what you see here? Extremely. But above all things, I am a marvel to you? I confess it. I am still young, am I not? Should you not have known me again, in spite of my 48 years of age? On the contrary, I do not find you the same person at all." "I understand," cried Athos with a gentle blush. "Everything, D'Artagnan, evening folly has its limit. Then your means, it appears, are improved. You have a capital house, your own, I presume? You have a park, and horses, servants. Athos smiled. Yes, I inherited this little property when I quitted the army, as I told you. The park is 20 acres, 20, comprising kitchen gardens and a common. I have 2 horses. I do not count my servant's bobtailed nag. My sporting dogs consist of 2 pointers, 2 harriers, and 2 setters. But then all this extravagance is not for myself, added Athos, laughing. Yes, I see, for the young man Raoul, said D'Artagnan. You guess aright, my friend. This youth is an orphan, deserted by his mother, who left him in the house of a poor country priest. I have brought him up. It is Raoul who has worked in me the change you see. I was dried up like a miserable tree, isolated, attached to nothing on earth. It was only a deep affection that could make me take root again and drag me back to life. This child has caused me to recover what I had lost. I had no longer any wish to live for myself. I have lived for him. I have corrected the vices that I had. I have assumed the virtues that I had not. Precept something, but example more. I may be mistaken, but I believe that Raoul will be as accomplished a gentleman as our degenerate age could display. The remembrance of Milady recurred to D'Artagnan. And you are happy? He said to his friend, as happy as it is allowed to one of God's creatures to be on this earth. But say out all you think, D'Artagnan, for you have not yet done so. You are too bad, Athos. One can hide nothing from you, answered D'Artagnan. I wished to ask you if you ever feel any emotions of terror resembling remorse. I finish your phrase. Yes and no. I do not feel remorse, because that woman, I profoundly hold, deserved her punishment. Had she one redeeming trait? I doubt it. I do not feel remorse, because had we allowed her to live she would have persisted in her work of destruction. But I do not mean, my friend, that we were right in what we did. Perhaps all blood demands some expiation. Hers had been accomplished. It remains, possibly, for us to accomplish ours. I have sometimes thought as you do, Athos. She had a son, that unhappy woman? Yes. Have you ever heard of him? Never. He must be about 23 years of age, said Athos in a low tone. I often think of that young man, D'Artagnan. Strange, for I had forgotten him, said the lieutenant. Athos smiled. The smile was melancholy. And Lord de Winter, do you know anything about him? I know that he is in high favor with Charles I. The fortunes of that monarch now are at low water. He shed the blood of Strafford. That confirms what I said just now. Blood will have blood. And the Queen? What Queen? Madame Henrietta of England, daughter of Henry Roman IV. She is at the Louvre, as you know. Yes, and I hear in bitter poverty. Her daughter, during the severest cold, was obliged for want of fire to remain in bed. Do you grasp that? Said Athos, shrugging his shoulders. The daughter of Henry Roman IV, shivering for want of a faggot. Why did she not ask from any one of us a home instead of from Mazarin? She should have wanted nothing. Have you ever seen the Queen of England? Inquired D'Artagnan. No, but my mother, as a child, saw her. Did I ever tell you that my mother was lady of honor to Marie de Medici? Never. You know, Athos, you never spoke much of such matters. Ah, mon Dieu, yes, you are right, Athos replied. But then there must be some occasion for speaking. Porthos wouldn't have waited for it so patiently, said D'Artagnan, with a smile. Every one according to his nature, my dear D'Artagnan. Porthos, in spite of a touch of vanity, has many excellent qualities. Have you seen him? I left him 5 days ago, said D'Artagnan, and he portrayed with Gascon wit and sprightliness the magnificence of Porthos in his ch.do of Pierrefonds, nor did he neglect to launch a few arrows of wit at the excellent Monsieur Mouston. I sometimes wonder, replied Athos, smiling at that gaiety which recalled the good old days, that we could form an association of men who would be, after 20 years of separation, still so closely bound together. Friendship throws out deep roots in honest hearts, D'Artagnan. Believe me, it is only the evil-minded who deny friendship. they cannot understand it. And Aramis, I have seen him also, said D'Artagnan, but he seemed to me cold. Ah, you have seen Aramis? Said Athos, turning on D'Artagnan a searching look. Why, it is a veritable pilgrimage, my dear friend, that you are making to the temple of friendship, as the poets would say. Why, yes, replied D'Artagnan, with embarrassment. Aramis, you know, continued Athos, is naturally cold, and then he is always involved in intrigues with women. I believe he is at this moment in a very complicated one, said D'Artagnan. Athos made no reply. He is not curious, thought D'Artagnan. Athos not only failed to reply, he even changed the subject of conversation. You see, said he, calling D'Artagnan's attention to the fact that they had come back to the Chateau after an hour's walk, we have made a tour of my domains. All is charming and everything savors of nobility, replied D'Artagnan. At this instant they heard the sound of horses' feet. It is Raoul who has come back, said Athos, and we can now hear how the poor child is. In fact, the young man appeared at the gate, covered with dust, entered the courtyard, leaped from his horse, which he consigned to the charge of a groom, and then went to greet the Count and D'Artagnan. Monsieur, said Athos, placing his hand on D'Artagnan's shoulder, Monsieur is the Chevalier D'Artagnan of whom you have often heard me speak, Raoul. Monsieur, said the young man, saluting again and more profoundly, Monsieur le Comte has pronounced your name before me as an example whenever he wished to speak of an intrepid and generous gentleman. That little compliment could not fail to move D'Artagnan. He extended a hand to Raoul and said, My young friend, all the praises that are given me should be passed on to the Count here, for he has educated me in everything and it is not his fault that his pupil profited so little from his instructions. But he will make it up in you, I am sure. I like your manner, Raoul, and your politeness has touched me. Athos was more delighted than can be told. He looked at D'Artagnan with an expression of gratitude, and then bestowed on Raoul one of those strange smiles, of which children are so proud when they receive them. Now, said D'Artagnan to himself, noticing that silent play of countenance, I am sure of it. I hope the accident has been of no consequence. They don't yet know, sir, on account of the swelling, but the doctor is afraid some tendon has been injured. At this moment a little boy, half peasant, half footboy, came to announce supper. Athos led his guest into a dining room of moderate size, the windows of which opened on one side on a garden, on the other on a hothouse full of magnificent flowers. D'Artagnan glanced at the dinner service. The plate was magnificent, old, and appertaining to the family. D'Artagnan stopped to look at a sideboard on, which was a superb ewer of silver. That workmanship is divine, he exclaimed. Yes, a chef-d'oeuvre of the great Florentine sculptor, Benvenuto Cellini, replied Athos. What battle does it represent? That of Marignan. Just at the point where one of my forefathers is offering his sword to Francis I, who has broken his. It was on that occasion that my ancestor, Enguerrand de Laffrey, was made a knight of the Order of St. Michael, besides which, the king, 15 years afterward, gave him also this ewer and a sword which you may have seen formerly in my house, also a lovely specimen of workmanship. Men were giants in those times, said Athos, now we are pygmies in comparison. Let us sit down to supper. Call Charles, he added, addressing the boy who waited. My good Charles, I particularly recommend to your care Planchet, the laquais of Monsieur D'Artagnan. He likes good wine. Now you have the key of the cellar. He has slept a long time on a hard bed, so he won't object to a soft one. Take every care of him, I beg of you. Charles bowed and retired. You think of everything, said D'Artagnan, and I thank you for Planchet, my dear Athos. Raoul stared on hearing this name, and looked at the Count to be quite sure that it was he whom the lieutenant thus addressed. That name sounds strange to you, said Athos, smiling. It was my nom de guerre when Monsieur D'Artagnan, 2 other gallant friends, and myself performed some feats of arms at the siege of La Rochelle under the deceased cardinal and Monsieur de Bassompierre. My friend is still so kind as to address me by that old and well-beloved appellation, which makes my heart glad when I hear it. It is an illustrious name, said the lieutenant, and had one day triumphal honors paid to it. What do you mean, sir? Inquired Raoul. You have not forgotten St. Gervais, Athos, and the napkin which was converted into a banner. And he then related to Raoul the story of the bastion, and Raoul fancied he was listening to one of those deeds of arms belonging to days of chivalry, so gloriously recounted by Tasso and Ariosto. D'Artagnan does not tell you, Raoul, said Athos, in his turn, that he was reckoned one of the finest swordsmen of his time, a knuckle of iron, a wrist of steel, a sure eye, and a glance of fire. That's what his adversary met with. He was 18, only 3 years older than you are, Raoul, when I saw him set to work, pitted against tried men. And did Monsieur d'Artagnan come off the conqueror? Asked the young man, with glistening eye. I killed one man, if I recollect rightly, replied D'Artagnan, with a look of inquiry directed to Athos. Another I disarmed or wounded. I don't remember which. Wounded, said Athos. It was a phenomenon of skill. The young man would willingly have prolonged this conversation far into the night, but Athos pointed out to him that his guest must need repose. Chapter 15. Athos as a diplomatist. D'Artagnan retired to bed, not to sleep, but to think over all he had heard that evening. Being naturally good-hearted, and having had once a liking for Athos, which had grown into a sincere friendship, he was delighted at thus meeting a man full of intelligence and moral strength, instead of a drunkard. He admitted without annoyance the continued superiority of Athos over himself, devoid as he was of that jealousy which may have saddened a less generous disposition. He was delighted also that the high qualities of Athos appeared to promise favorably for his mission. Nevertheless, it seemed to him that Athos was not in all respects sincere and frank. Who was the youth he had adopted and who bore so striking a resemblance to him? What could explain Athos's having re-entered the world, and the extreme sobriety he had observed at table? The absence of Grimaud, whose name had never once been uttered by Athos, gave D'Artagnan uneasiness. It was evident either that he no longer possessed the confidence of his friend, or that Athos was bound by some invisible chain, or that he had been forewarned of the lieutenant's visit. He could not help thinking of M. Rochefort, whom he had seen in Notre Dame. Could de Rochefort have forestalled him with Athos? Again, the moderate fortune which Athos possessed, concealed as it was, so skillfully, seemed to show a regard for appearances and to betray a latent ambition which may be easily aroused. The clear and vigorous intellect of Athos would render him more open to conviction than a less able man would be. He would enter into the minister's schemes with the more ardor, because his natural activity would be doubled by necessity. Resolved to seek an explanation on all these points on the following day, D'Artagnan, in spite of his fatigue, prepared for an attack and determined that it should take place after breakfast. He determined to cultivate the goodwill of the youth Raoul and, either whilst fencing with him or when out shooting, to extract from his simplicity some information which would connect the Athos of old times with the Athos of the present. But D'Artagnan, at the same time, being a man of extreme caution, was quite aware what injury he should do himself, if by any indiscretion or awkwardness he should betray his maneuvering to the experienced eye of Athos. Besides, to tell truth, whilst D'Artagnan was quite disposed to adopt a subtle course against the cunning of Aramis or the vanity of Porthos, he was ashamed to equivocate with Athos, true-hearted, open Athos. It seemed to him that if Porthos and Aramis deemed him superior to them in the arts of diplomacy, they would like him all the better for it, but that Athos, on the contrary, would despise him. Ah, why is not Grimaud, the taciturn Grimaud, here? Thought D'Artagnan. There are so many things his silence would have told me. With Grimaud's silence was another form of eloquence. There reigned a perfect stillness in the house. D'Artagnan had heard the door shut and the shutters barred. The dogs became in their turn silent. At last a nightingale, lost in a thicket of shrubs, in the amid of its most melodious cadences had fluted low and lower into stillness and fallen asleep. Not a sound was heard in the castle except of a footstep up and down, in the chamber above, as he supposed, the bedroom of Athos. He is walking about and thinking, thought D'Artagnan, but of what? It is impossible to know. Everything else may be guessed, but not that. At length Athos went to bed, apparently, for the noise ceased. Silence and fatigue together overcame D'Artagnan, and sleep overtook him also. He was not, however, a good sleeper. Scarcely had dawn gilded his window curtains when he sprang out of bed and opened the windows. Somebody, he perceived, was in the courtyard, moving stealthily, true to his custom of never passing anything over that it was within his power to know. D'Artagnan looked out of the window, and perceived the close red coat and brown hair of Raoul. The young man was opening the door of the stable. He then, with noiseless haste, took out the horse that he had ridden on the previous evening, saddled and bridled it himself, and led the animal into the alley to the right of the kitchen garden, opened a side door which conducted him to a bridle road, shut it after him, and D'Artagnan saw him pass by like a dart, bending, as he went, beneath the pendant flowery branches of maple and acacia. The road, as D'Artagnan had observed, was the way to Blois. So, thought the Gascon, here's a young blade who has already his love affair, who doesn't at all agree with Athos in his hatred to the fair sex. He's not going to hunt, for he has neither dogs nor arms. He's not going on a message, for he goes secretly. Why does he go in secret? Is he afraid of me or of his father? For I am sure the Count is his father. By Jove, I shall know about that soon, for I shall soon speak out to Athos. Day was now advanced. All the noises that had ceased the night before rewakened one after the other. The bird on the branch, the dog in his kennel, the sheep in the field, the boats moored in the Loire. Evening became alive and vocal. The latter, leaving the shore, abandoned themselves gaily to the current. The Gascon gave a last twirl to his mustache, a last turn to his hair, brushed, from habit, the brim of his hat with the sleeve of his doublet, and went downstairs. Scarcely had he descended the last step of the threshold, when he saw Athos bent down toward the ground, as if he were looking for a crown piece in the dust. "Good morning, my dear host," cried D'Artagnan. "Good day to you. Have you slept well?" "Excellently, Athos. But what are you looking for? You are perhaps a tulip fancier? My dear friend, if I am, you must not laugh at me for being so. In the country people alter. One gets to like, without knowing it, all those beautiful objects that God causes to spring from the earth, which are despised in cities. I was looking anxiously for some iris roots I planted here, close to this reservoir, and which someone has trampled upon this morning. These gardeners are the most careless people in the world. In bringing the horse out to the water they've allowed him to walk over the border." D'Artagnan began to smile. "Ah, you think so, do you?" And he took his friend along the alley, where a number of tracks like those which had trampled down the flower beds were visible. "Here are the horse's hoofs again, it seems, Athos," he said carelessly. "Yes, truly, the marks are recent." "Quite so," replied the lieutenant. "Who went out this morning?" Athos asked, uneasily. "Has any horse got loose?" "Not likely," answered the Gascon. "These marks are regular." "Where is Raoul?" asked Athos. "How is it that I have not seen him?" "Hush!" exclaimed D'Artagnan, putting his finger on his lips, and he related what he had seen, watching Athos all the while. "Ah, he's gone to Blois, the poor boy. Therefore, to inquire after the little La Valliere. She has sprained her foot, you know." "You think he has?" "I am sure of it," said Athos. "Don't you see that Raoul is in love?" "Truly." "With whom? With a child 7 years old. Dear friend, at Raoul's age the heart is so expansive that it must encircle one object or another, fancied or real. Well, his love is half real, half fanciful. She is the prettiest little creature in the world, with flaxen hair, blue eyes, at once saucy and languishing. But what say you to Raoul's fancy?" "Nothing. I laugh at Raoul. But this first desire of the heart is imperious. I remember, just at his age, how deep in love I was with a Grecian statue which our good king, then Henry Roman IV, gave my father, insomuch that I was mad with grief when they told me that the story of Pygmalion was nothing but a fable. It is mere want of occupation. You do not make Raoul work, so he takes his own way of employing himself." "Exactly. Therefore I think of sending him away from here. You will be wise to do so, no doubt of it, but it will break his heart, so long as 3 or 4 years ago he used to adorn and adore his little idol, whom he will some day fall in love with in right earnest if he remains here. The parents of little La Valliere have for a long time perceived and been amused at it. Now they begin to look concerned. Nonsense. However, Rael must be diverted from this fancy. Send him away or you will never make a man of him. I think I shall send him to Paris. So, thought D'Artagnan, and it seemed to him that the moment for attack had arrived. Suppose, he said, we roughly chalk out a career for this young man. I wish to consult you about something. Do so. Do you think it is time for us to enter the service? But are you not still in the service, you, D'Artagnan? I mean active service. Our former life, has it still no attractions for you? Would you not be happy to begin anew in my society and in that of Porthos, the exploits of our youth? Do you propose to me to do so, D'Artagnan? Decidedly and honestly. On whose side? Asked Athos, fixing his clear, benevolent glance on the countenance of the Gascon. Ah, devil take it, you speak in earnest, and must have a definite answer. Listen, D'Artagnan. There is but one person, or rather, one cause, to whom a man like me can be useful, that of the king. Exactly, answered the musketeer. Yes, but let us understand each other, returned Athos, seriously. If by the cause of the king you mean that of Monsieur de Mazarin, we do not understand each other. I don't say exactly, answered the Gascon, confused. Come, D'Artagnan, don't let us play a sidelong game. Your hesitation, your evasion, tells me at once on whose side you are. For that party no one dares openly to recruit, and when people recruit for it, it is with averted eyes and humble voice. Ah, my dear Athos, you know that I am not alluding to you. You are the pearl of brave, bold men. I speak of that spiteful and intriguing Italian, of the pedant who has tried to put on his own head a crown which he stole from under a pillow, of the scoundrel who calls his party the party of the king, who wants to send the princes of the blood to prison, not daring to kill them, as our cardinal did, of the miser, who weighs his gold pieces and keeps the clipped ones for fear, though he is rich, of losing them at play next morning, of the impudent fellow who insults the queen, as they say, so much the worse for her, and who is going in 3 months to make war upon us, in order that he may retain his pensions. Is that the master whom you propose to me? I thank you, D'Artagnan. You are more impetuous than you were, returned D'Artagnan. Age has warmed, not chilled your blood. Who informed you this was the master I proposed to you? Devil take it, he muttered to himself. Don't let me betray my secrets to a man not inclined to entertain them. Well, then, said Athos, what are your schemes? What do you propose? Sounds nothing more than natural. You live on your estate, happy in golden mediocrity. Porthos has, perhaps, 60,000 francs income. Aramis has always 50 duchesses quarreling over the priest, as they quarreled formerly over the musketeer. But I, what have I in the world? I have worn my cuirass these 20 years, kept down in this inferior rank, without going forward or backward, hardly half living. In fact, I am dead. Well, when there is some idea of being resuscitated, you say he's a scoundrel, an impudent fellow, a miser, a bad master. By Jove, I am of your opinion. But find me a better one or give me the means of living. Athos was for a few moments thoughtful. Good. D'Artagnan is for Mazarin, he said to himself. From that moment he grew very guarded. On his side D'Artagnan became more cautious also. You spoke to me, Athos resumed, of Porthos. Have you persuaded him to seek his fortune? But he has wealth, I believe, already. Doubtless he has. But such is man, we always want something more than we already have. What does Porthos wish for? To be a baron. Ah, true. I forgot, said Athos, laughing. It is true, thought the Gascon. Where has he heard it? Does he correspond with Aramis? Ah, if I knew that he did I should know all. The conversation was interrupted by the entrance of Rael. Is our little neighbor worse? Asked D'Artagnan, seeing a look of vexation on the face of the youth. Ah, sir, replied Raoul. Her fall is a very serious one, and without any ostensible injury. The physician fears she will be lame for life. This is terrible, said Athos. And what makes me all the more wretched, sir, is that I was the cause of this misfortune. How so? Asked Athos. It was to run to meet me that she leaped from that pile of wood. There's only one remedy, dear Raoul, that is to marry her as a compensation, remarked D'Artagnan. Ah, sir, answered Raoul, you joke about a real misfortune. That is cruel, truly. The good understanding between the two friends was not in the least altered by the morning's skirmish. They breakfasted with a good appetite, looking now and then at poor Raoul, who with moist eyes and a full heart, scarcely ate at all. After breakfast 2 letters arrived for Athos, who read them with profound attention, whilst D'Artagnan could not restrain himself from jumping up several times on seeing him read these epistles, in one of which, there being at the time a very strong light, he perceived the fine writing of Aramis. The other was in a feminine hand, long and crossed. Come, said D'Artagnan to Raoul, seeing that Athos wished to be alone, come, let us take a turn in the fencing gallery. That will amuse you. And they both went into a low room where there were foils, gloves, masks, breastplates, and all the accessories for a fencing match. In a quarter of an hour Athos joined them, and at the same moment Charles brought in a letter for D'Artagnan, which a messenger had just desired may be instantly delivered. It was now Athos's turn to take a sly look. D'Artagnan read the letter with apparent calmness and said, shaking his head, "See, dear friend, what it is to belong to the army. Faith, you are truly right not to return to it. Monsieur de Troisville is ill, so my company can't do without me. There, my leave is at an end. Do you return to Paris?" asked Athos quickly. "Agathe, yes, but why don't you come there also?" Athos colored a little and answered, "Should I go, I shall be delighted to see you there." "Hallo, Planchet," cried the Gascon from the door, "we must set out in 10 minutes. Give the horses some hay." Then turning to Athos he added, "I seem to miss something here. I am really sorry to go away without having seen Grimaud." "Grimaud," replied Athos. "I'm surprised you have never so much as asked after him. I have lent him to a friend, who will understand the signs he makes," returned D'Artagnan. "I hope so." The friends embraced cordially. D'Artagnan pressed Raoul's hand. "Will you not come with me?" he said. "I shall pass by Blois." Raoul turned toward Athos, who showed him by a secret sign that he did not wish him to go. "No, monsieur," replied the young man, "I will remain with Monsieur le Comte." "Adieu, then, to both, my good friends," said D'Artagnan. "May God preserve you," as we used to say when we said goodbye to each other in the late cardinal's time. Athos waved his hand, Raoul bowed, and D'Artagnan and Planchet set out. The Count followed them with his eyes, his hands resting on the shoulders of the youth, whose height was almost equal to his own. But as soon as they were out of sight he said, "Raoul, we set out tonight for Paris." "Eh?" cried the young man, turning pale. "You may go and offer your adieus and mine to Madame de Saint-Remy. I shall wait for you here till 7. The young man bent low, with an expression of sorrow and gratitude mingled, and retired in order to saddle his horse. As to D'Artagnan, scarcely, on his side, was he out of sight when he drew from his pocket a letter, which he read over again. "Return immediately to Paris. J.M." "The epistle is laconic," said D'Artagnan, "and if there had not been a postscript, probably I should not have understood it. But happily there is a postscript." And he read that welcome postscript, which made him forget the abruptness of the letter. "P.S. Go to the king's treasurer at Blois, tell him your name, and show him this letter. You will receive 200 pistols." "Assuredly," said D'Artagnan. "I admire this piece of prose. The cardinal writes better than I thought." Chapter 16. The Duc de Beaufort. The circumstances that had hastened the return of D'Artagnan to Paris were as follows. One evening, when Mazarin, according to custom, went to visit the queen, in passing the guard chamber he heard loud voices, Wishing to know on what topic the soldiers were conversing, he approached with his wonted wolf-like step, pushed open the door and put his head close to the chink. There was a dispute among the guards. I tell you, one of them was saying that if Coisel predicted that, it is as good as true. I know nothing about it, but I have heard say that he's not only an astrologer, but a magician. Deuce take it, friend, if he's one of your friends you will ruin him in saying so. Why? Because he may be tried for it. Ah, absurd. They don't burn sorcerers nowadays. No, it is not a long time since the late cardinal burnt Urban Grandier, though. My friend, Urban Grandier wasn't a sorcerer, he was a learned man. He didn't predict the future, he knew the past, often a more dangerous thing. Mazarin nodded in assent, but wishing to know what this prediction was about which they disputed, he remained in the same place. I don't say, resumed the guard, that Coisel is not a sorcerer, but I say that if his prophecy gets wind, it's a sure way to prevent its coming true. How so? Why, in this way, if Coisel says loud enough for the cardinal to hear him, on such or such a day such a prisoner will escape, it is plain that the cardinal will take measures of precaution and that the prisoner will not escape. Good Lord, said another guard, who may have been thought asleep on a bench, but who had lost not a syllable of the conversation. Do you suppose that men can escape their destiny? If it is written over there, in heaven, that the Duc de Beaufort is to escape, he will escape, and all the precautions of the cardinal will not prevent it. Mazarin started. He was an Italian and therefore superstitious. He walked straight into the amid of the guards, who on seeing him were silent. What were you saying? He asked with his flattering manner. That Monsieur de Beaufort had escaped, were you not? Oh, no, my lord, said the incredulous soldier. He's well guarded now. We only said he would escape. Who said so? Repeat your story, Saint Laurent, replied the man, turning to the originator of the tale. My lord, said the guard, I have simply mentioned the prophecy I heard from a man named Coisel, who believes that, be he ever so closely watched and guarded, the Duke of Beaufort will escape before Whitsuntide. Coisel is a madman, returned the cardinal. No, replied the soldier, tenacious in his credulity. He has foretold many things which have come to pass, for instance, that the queen would have a son, that Monsieur Coligny would be killed in a duel with the Duc de Guise, and finally, that the coadjutor would be made cardinal. Well, the queen has not only one son, but two. Then Monsieur de Coligny was killed, and— Yes, said Mazarin, but the coadjutor is not yet made cardinal. No, my lord, but he will be, answered the guard. Mazarin made a grimace, as if he meant to say, but he does not wear the cardinal's cap. Then he added, so, my friend, it's your opinion that Monsieur de Beaufort will escape? That's my idea, my lord. And if your eminence were to offer to make me at this moment governor of the castle of Vincennes, I should refuse it. After Whitsuntide it would be another thing. There is nothing so convincing as a firm conviction. It has its own effect upon the most incredulous, and far from being incredulous, Mazarin was superstitious. He went away thoughtful and anxious and returned to his own room, where he summoned Bernouin and desired him to fetch there in the morning the special guard he had placed over Monsieur de Beaufort and to awaken him whenever he should arrive. The guard had, in fact, touched the cardinal in the tenderest point. During the whole 5 years in which the Duc de Beaufort had been in prison, not a day had passed in which the cardinal had not felt a secret dread of his escape. It was not possible, as he knew well, to confine for the whole of his life the grandson of Henry Roman IV, especially when this young prince was scarcely 30 years of age. But however and whenever he did escape, what hatred he must cherish against him to whom he owed his long imprisonment, who had taken him, rich, brave, glorious, beloved by women, feared by men, to cut off his life's best, happiest years, for it is not life, it is merely existence, in prison. Meantime, Mazarin redoubled his surveillance over the duke, but like the miser in the fable, he could not sleep for thinking of his treasure. Often he awoke in the night, suddenly, dreaming that he had been robbed of Monsieur de Beaufort. Then he inquired about him and had the vexation of hearing that the prisoner played, drank, sang, but that whilst playing, drinking, singing, he often stopped short to vow that Mazarin should pay dear for all the amusements he had forced him to enter into at Vincennes. So much did this one idea haunt the cardinal evening in his sleep, that when at 7 in the morning Bernouin came to arouse him, his first words were, "Well, what's the matter? Has Monsieur de Beaufort escaped from Vincennes?" "I do not think so, my lord," said Bernouin, "but you will hear about him, for La Ramee is here and awaits the commands of your eminence." "Tell him to come in," said Mazarin, arranging his pillows, so that he may receive the visitor sitting up in bed. The officer entered, a large fat man, with an open physiognomy. His air of perfect serenity made Mazarin uneasy. "Approach, sir," said the cardinal. The officer obeyed. "Do you know what they are saying here?" "No, your eminence." "Well, they say that Monsieur de Beaufort is going to escape from Vincennes, if he has not done so already." The officer's face expressed complete stupefaction. He opened at once his little eyes and his great mouth, to inhale better the joke his eminence deigned to address to him, and ended by a burst of laughter, so violent that his great limbs shook in hilarity as they would have done in an ague. "Escape, my lord, escape. Your eminence does not then know where Monsieur de Beaufort is?" "Yes, I do, sir. In the donjon of Vincennes." "Yes, sir. In a room the walls of which are 7 feet thick, with grated windows, each bar as thick as my arm." "Sir," replied Mazarin, "with perseverance one may penetrate through a wall, with a watch spring one may saw through an iron bar." "Then my lord does not know that there are 8 guards about him, 4 in his chamber, 4 in the antechamber, and that they never leave him." "But he leaves his room, he plays at tennis at them all." "Sir, those amusements are allowed, but if your eminence wishes it, we will discontinue the permission." "No, no," cried Mazarin, fearing that should his prisoner ever leave his prison he would be the more exasperated against him if he thus retrenched his amusement. He then asked with whom he played. "My lord, either with the officers of the guard, with the other prisoners, or with me." "But does he not approach the walls while playing?" "Your eminence doesn't know those walls. They are 60 feet high, and I doubt if Monsieur de Beaufort is sufficiently weary of life to risk his neck by jumping off." "Hum," said the cardinal, beginning to feel more comfortable. "You mean to say, then, my dear Monsieur La Ramee, that unless Monsieur de Beaufort can contrive to metamorphose himself into a little bird, I will continue answerable for him." "Take care. You assert a great deal," said Mazarin. Monsieur de Beaufort told the guards who took him to Vincennes that he had often thought what he should do in case he were put into prison, and that he had found out 40 ways of escaping. "My lord, if among these 40 there had been one good way he would have been out long ago." "Come, come, not such a fool as I fancied," thought Mazarin. "Besides, my lord must remember that Monsieur de Chavigny is governor of Vincennes," continued La Ramee, "and that Monsieur de Chavigny is not friendly to Monsieur de Beaufort." "Yes, but Monsieur de Chavigny is sometimes absent." "When he is absent I am there." "But when you leave him, for instance?" "Oh, when I leave him, I place in my stead a bold fellow who aspires to be His Majesty's special guard. I promise you he keeps a good watch over the prisoner. During the 3 weeks that he has been with me, I have only had to reproach him with one thing, being too severe with the prisoners." "And who is this Cerberus?" "A certain Monsieur Grimaud, my lord." "And what was he before he went to Vincennes?" "He was in the country, as I was told by the person who recommended him to me." "And who recommended this man to you?" "The steward of the Duc de Gramont." "He is not a gossip, I hope?" "Lord a mercy, my lord, I thought for a long time that he was dumb. He answers only by signs. It seems his former master accustomed him to that." "Well, dear Monsieur La Ramee," replied the cardinal, "let him prove a true and thankful keeper, and we will shut our eyes upon his rural misdeeds and put on his back a uniform to make him respectable, and in the pockets of that uniform some pistols to drink to the king's health." Mazarin was large in promises, quite unlike the virtuous Monsieur Grimaud so bepraised by La Ramee, for he said nothing, and did much. It was now 9 o'clock. The cardinal, therefore, got up, perfumed himself, dressed, and went to the queen to tell her what had detained him. The queen, who was scarcely less afraid of Monsieur de Beaufort than the cardinal himself, and who was almost as superstitious as he was, made him repeat word for word all La Ramie's praises of his deputy. Then, when the cardinal had ended, "Alas, sir." Chapter 17. Duc de Beaufort amused his leisure hours in the donjon of Vincennes. The captive, who was the source of so much alarm to the cardinal, and whose means of escape disturbed the repose of the whole court, was wholly unconscious of the terror he caused at the Palais Royal. He had found himself so strictly guarded that he soon perceived the fruitlessness of any attempt at escape. His vengeance, therefore, consisted in coining curses on the head of Mazarin. He evening tried to make some verses on him, but soon gave up the attempt, for Monsieur de Beaufort had not only not received from heaven the gift of versifying, he had the greatest difficulty in expressing himself in prose. The Duke was the grandson of Henry Roman IV, and Gabrielle d'Esters, as good-natured, as brave, as proud, and above all, as Gascon as his ancestor, but less elaborately educated, after having been for some time after the death of Louis Roman XIII, the favorite, the confidant, the first man, in short, at the court. He had been obliged to yield his place to Mazarin and so became the second in influence and favor, and eventually, as he was stupid enough to be vexed at this change of position, the queen had had him arrested and sent to Vincennes in charge of Gitonant, who made his appearance in these pages in the beginning of this history and whom we shall see again. It is understood, of course, that when we say the queen, Mazarin is meant. During the 5 years of this seclusion, which would have improved and matured the intellect of any other man, M. de Beaufort, had he not affected to brave the cardinal, despise princes, and walk alone without adherents or disciples, would either have regained his liberty or made partisans. But these considerations never occurred to the duke, and every day the cardinal received fresh accounts of him, which were as unpleasant as possible to the minister. After having failed in poetry, Monsieur de Beaufort tried drawing. He drew portraits, with a piece of coal, of the cardinal, and as his talents did not enable him to produce a very good likeness, he wrote under the picture that there may be little doubt regarding the original portrait of the illustrious coxcomb, Mazarin. Monsieur de Chavigny, the governor of Vincennes, waited upon the duke to request that he would amuse himself in some other way, or that at all events, if he drew likenesses, he would not put mottos underneath them. The next day the prisoner's room was full of pictures and mottos. Monsieur de Beaufort, in common with many other prisoners, was bent upon doing things that were prohibited, and the only resource the governor had was, one day when the duke was playing at tennis, to efface all these drawings, consisting chiefly of profiles. M. de Beaufort did not venture to draw the cardinal's fat face. The duke thanked Monsieur de Chavigny for having, as he said, cleaned his drawing paper for him. He then divided the walls of his room into compartments and dedicated each of these compartments to some incident in Mazarin's life. In one was depicted the illustrious coxcomb receiving a shower of blows from Cardinal Bentivoglio, whose servant he had been; another, the illustrious Mazarin, acting the part of Ignatius Loyola in a tragedy of that name; a third, the illustrious Mazarin, stealing the portfolio of Prime Minister from Monsieur de Chavigny, who had expected to have it; a fourth, the illustrious coxcomb Mazarin, refusing to give Lapert, the young king's valet, clean sheets, and saving that it was quite enough for the King of France to have clean sheets every 3 months. The governor, of course, thought proper to threaten his prisoner that if he did not give up drawing such pictures he should be obliged to deprive him of all the means of amusing himself in that manner. To this Monsieur de Beaufort replied that since every opportunity of distinguishing himself in arms was taken from him, he wished to make himself celebrated in the arts. Since he could not be a Bayard, he would become a Raphael or a Michael Angelo. Nevertheless, one day when Monsieur de Beaufort was walking in the meadow his fire was put out, his charcoal all removed, taken away, and thus his means of drawing utterly destroyed. The poor duke swore, fell into a rage, yelled, and declared that they wished to starve him to death as they had starved the Marshal Ornano and the Grand Prior of Vendny. But he refused to promise that he would not make any more drawings and remained without any fire in the room all the winter. His next act was to purchase a dog from one of his keepers. With this animal, which he called Pistache, he was often shut up for hours alone, superintending, as every one supposed, its education. At last, when Pistache was sufficiently well trained, Monsieur de Beaufort invited the governor and officers of Vincennes to attend a representation which he was going to have in his apartment. The party assembled, the room was lighted with wax lights, and the prisoner, with a bit of plaster he had taken out of the wall of his room, had traced a long white line representing a cord on the floor. Pistache, on a signal from his master, placed himself on this line, raised himself on his hind paws, and holding in his front paws a wand with which clothes used to be beaten, he began to dance upon the line with as many contortions as a rope dancer. Having been several times up and down it, he gave the wand back to his master, and began without hesitation to perform the same evolutions over again. The intelligent creature was received with loud applause. The first part of the entertainment being concluded, Pistache was desired to say what o'clock it was. He was shown Monsieur de Chavigny's watch. It was then 6:30. The dog raised and dropped his paw 6 times. The seventh he let it remain upraised. Nothing could be better done. A sundial could not have shown the hour with greater precision. Then the question was put to him, who was the best jailer in all the prisons in France? The dog performed 3 evolutions around the circle and laid himself, with the deepest respect, at the feet of Monsieur de Chavigny, who at first seemed inclined to like the joke and laughed long and loud, but a frown succeeded, and he bit his lips with vexation. Then the Duke put to Pistache this difficult question, who was the greatest thief in the world? Pistache went again around the circle, but stopped at no one, and at last went to the door and began to scratch and bark. "See, gentlemen," said M. de Beaufort, "this wonderful animal, not finding here what I ask for, seeks it out of doors. You shall, however, have his answer. Pistache, my friend, come here. Is not the greatest thief in the world Monsieur the King's secretary Lecamus, who came to Paris with 20 francs in his pocket and who now possesses 10 millions? The dog shook his head. Then is it not, resumed the Duke, the superintendent Emery, who gave his son, when he was married, 300,000 francs and a house, compared to which the Tuileries are a heap of ruins and the Louvre a paltry building? The dog again shook his head as if to say, no. Then, said the prisoner, let's think who it can be. Can it possibly be, the illustrious coxcomb, Mazarin de Pisana, hey? Pistache made violent signs that it was, by raising and lowering his head 8 or 10 times successively. Gentlemen, you see, said the Duke to those present who dared not evening smile, that it is the illustrious coxcomb who is the greatest thief in the world, at least according to Pistache. Let us go on to another of his exercises. Gentlemen, there was a profound silence in the room. When the Duke again addressed them, do you not remember that the Duc de Guise taught all the dogs in Paris to jump for Mademoiselle de Pons, whom he styled the fairest of the fair? Pistache is going to show you how superior he is to all other dogs. Monsieur de Chavigny, be so good as to lend me your cane. Monsieur de Chavigny handed his cane to Monsieur de Beaufort. Monsieur de Beaufort placed it horizontally at the height of 1 foot. Now, Pistache, my good dog, jump the height of this cane for Madame de Montbazon. But, interposed Monsieur de Chavigny, it seems to me that Pistache is only doing what other dogs have done when they jumped for Mademoiselle de Pons. Stop, said the Duke. Pistache, jump for the Queen. And he raised his cane 6 inches higher. The dog sprang, and in spite of the height, jumped lightly over it. And now, said the Duke, raising it still 6 inches higher, jump for the King. The dog obeyed and jumped quickly over the cane. Now, then, said the Duke, and as he spoke, lowered the cane almost level with the ground. Pistache, my friend, jump for the illustrious coxcomb, Mazarin de Pisana. The dog turned his back to the cane. What? Asked the Duke. What do you mean? And he gave him the cane again, first making a semicircle from the head to the tail of Pistache. Jump then, Monsieur Pistache. But Pistache, as at first, turned round on his legs and stood with his back to the cane. Monsieur de Beaufort made the experiment a 3rd time, but by this time Pistache's patience was exhausted. He threw himself furiously upon the cane, wrested it from the hands of the prince, and broke it with his tess. Monsieur de Beaufort took the pieces out of his mouth and presented them with great formality to Monsieur de Chavigny, saying that for that evening the entertainment was ended, but in 3 months it should be repeated, when Pistache would have learned a few new tricks. 3 days afterward Pistache was found dead, poisoned. Then the Duke said openly that his dog had been killed by a drug with which they meant to poison him, and one day after dinner he went to bed, calling out that he had pains in his stomach, and that Mazarin had poisoned him. This fresh impertinence reached the ears of the cardinal, and alarmed him greatly. The donjon of Vincennes was considered very unhealthy, and Madame de Rambouillet had said that the room in which the Marshal Ornano and the Grand Prior de Venmy had died was worth its weight in arsenic, a bon mot which had great success. So it was ordered the prisoner was henceforth to eat nothing that had not previously been tasted, and La Ramee was in consequence placed near him as taster. Every kind of revenge was practiced upon the Duke by the governor in return for the insults of the innocent Pistache. De Chavigny, who, according to report, was a son of Richelieu's and had been a creature of the late cardinal's, understood tyranny. He took from the Duke all the steel knives and silver forks and replaced them with silver knives and wooden forks, pretending that as he had been informed that the Duke was to pass all his life at Vincennes, he was afraid of his prisoner attempting suicide. A fortnight afterward the Duke, going to the tennis court, found 2 rows of trees about the size of his little finger planted by the roadside. He asked what they were for and was told that they were to shade him from the sun on some future day. One morning the gardener went to him and told him, as if to please him, that he was going to plant a bed of asparagus for his especial use. Now, since, as everyone knows, asparagus takes 4 years in coming to perfection, this civility infuriated Monsieur de Beaufort. At last his patience was exhausted. He assembled his keepers, and notwithstanding his well-known difficulty of utterance, addressed them as follows. Gentlemen, will you permit a grandson of Henry Roman IV to be overwhelmed with insults and ignominy? Odds fish, as my grandfather used to say, I once reigned in Paris. Do you know that? I had the king and monsieur the whole of one day in my care. The queen at that time liked me and called me the most honest man in the kingdom. Gentlemen and citizens, set me free. I shall go to the Louvre and strangle Mazarin. You shall be my bodyguard. I will make you all captains, with good pensions. Odds fish. On, march forward. But eloquent as he may be, the eloquence of the grandson of Henry Roman IV did not touch those hearts of stone. Not one man stirred. So Monsieur de Beaufort was obliged to be satisfied with calling them all kinds of rascals underneath the sun. Sometimes, when Monsieur de Chavigny paid him a visit, the Duke used to ask him what he should think if he saw an army of Parisians, all fully armed, appear at Vincennes to deliver him from prison. My lord, answered de Chavigny, with a low bow, I have on the ramparts 20 pieces of artillery and in my casemates 30,000 guns. I should bombard the troops till not one grain of gunpowder was unexploded. Yes, but after you had fired off your 30,000 guns they would take the donjon. The donjon being taken, I should be obliged to let them hang you, at which I should be most unhappy, certainly. And in his turn the Duke bowed low to Monsieur de Chavigny. For myself, on the other hand, my lord, returned the governor, when the first rebel should pass the threshold of my postern doors I should be obliged to kill you with my own hand, since you were confided peculiarly to my care and as I am obliged to give you up, dead or alive. And once more he bowed low before his highness. These bittersweet pleasantries lasted 10 minutes, sometimes longer, but always finished thus. Monsieur de Chavigny, turning toward the door, used to call out, "Hallo, La Ramee!" La Ramee came into the room. La Ramee, I recommend Monsieur le Duc to you, particularly. Treat him as a man of his rank and family ought to be treated. That is, never leave him alone an instant. La Ramee became, therefore, the Duke's dinner guest by compulsion, an eternal keeper, the shadow of his person, but La Ramee, gay, frank, convivial, fond of play, a great hand at tennis, had one defect in the Duke's eyes, his incorruptibility. Now, although La Ramee appreciated as of a certain value, the honor of being shut up with a prisoner of so great importance. Still, the pleasure of living in intimacy with the grandson of Henry Roman IV hardly compensated for the loss of that which he had experienced in going from time to visit his family. One may be a jailer or a keeper, and at the same time a good father and husband. La Ramee adored his wife and children, whom now he could only catch a glimpse of from the top of the wall, when in order to please him they used to walk on the opposite side of the moat. It was too brief an enjoyment, and La Ramee felt that the gaiety of heart he had regarded as the cause of health, of which it was perhaps rather the result, would not long survive such a mode of life. He accepted, therefore, with delight, an offer made to him by his friend the steward of the Duc de Gramont, to give him a substitute. He also spoke of it to Monsieur de Chavigny, who promised that he would not oppose it in any way, that is, if he approved of the person proposed. We consider it useless to draw a physical or moral portrait of Grimaud, if, as we hope, our readers have not wholly forgotten the first part of this work. They must have preserved a clear idea of that estimable individual who is wholly unchanged, except that he is 20 years older, an advance in life that has made him only more silent, although, since the change that had been working in himself, Athos had given Grimaud permission to speak. Chapter 18. Grimaud begins his functions. Grimaud, upon that presented himself with his smooth exterior at the donjon of Vincennes. Now Monsieur de Chavigny piqued himself on his infallible penetration, for that which almost proved that he was the son of Richelieu was his everlasting pretension. He examined attentively the countenance of the applicant for place, and fancied that the contracted eyebrows, thin lips, hooked nose, and prominent cheekbones of Grimaud were favorable signs. He addressed about 12 words to him. Grimaud answered in 4. "Here's a promising fellow, and it is I who have found out his merits," said Monsieur de Chavigny. "Go," he added, "and make yourself agreeable to Monsieur La Ramee, and tell him that you suit me in all respects." Grimaud had every quality that could attract a man on duty who wishes to have a deputy. So, after 1,000 questions which met with only a word in reply, La Ramee, fascinated by this sobriety in speech, rubbed his hands and engaged Grimaud. "My orders?" asked Grimaud. "They are these: never to leave the prisoner alone, to keep away from him every pointed or cutting instrument, and to prevent his conversing any length of time with the keepers." "Those are all?" asked Grimaud. "All now," replied La Ramee. "Good," answered Grimaud, and he went right to the prisoner. The Duke was in the act of combing his beard, which he had allowed to grow, as well as his hair, in order to reproach Mazarin with his wretched appearance and condition. But having some days previously seen from the top of the donjon Madame de Montbazon pass in her carriage, and still cherishing an affection for that beautiful woman, he did not wish to be to her what he wished to be to Mazarin, and in the hope of seeing her again had asked for a leaden comb, which was allowed him. The comb was to be a leaden one, because his beard, like that of most fair people, was rather red. He therefore dyed it thus whilst combing it. As Grimaud entered he saw this comb on the tea-table. He took it up, and as he took it he made a low bow. The Duke looked at this strange figure with surprise. The figure put the comb in its pocket. "Ho, hey, what's that?" cried the Duke. "Who is this creature?" Grimaud did not answer, but bowed a second time. "Are you dumb?" cried the Duke. Grimaud made a sign that he was not. "What are you, then? Answer, I command you," said the Duke. "A keeper," replied Grimaud. "A keeper," reiterated the Duke. "There was nothing wanting in my collection except this gallows bird. Hello, La Ramee, someone." La Ramee ran in haste to obey the call. "Who is this wretch who takes my comb and puts it in his pocket?" asked the Duke. "One of your guards, my prince, a man of talent and merit, whom you will like, as I and Monsieur de Chavigny do, I am sure." "Why does he take my comb? Why do you take my lord's comb?" asked La Ramee. Grimaud drew the comb from his pocket and, passing his fingers over the largest tess, pronounced this one word, pointed. "True," said La Ramee. "What does the animal say?" asked the Duke. "That the king has forbidden your lordship to have any pointed instrument." "Are you mad, La Ramee?" You yourself gave me this comb. I was very wrong, my lord, for in giving it to you I acted in opposition to my orders. The Duke looked furiously at Grimaud. I perceive that this creature will be my particular aversion, he muttered. Grimaud, nevertheless, was resolved for certain reasons not at once to come to a full rupture with the prisoner. He wanted to inspire, not a sudden repugnance, but a good, sound, steady hatred. He retired, therefore, and gave place to 4 guards who, having breakfasted, could attend on the prisoner. A fresh practical joke now occurred to the Duke. He had asked for crawfish for his breakfast on the following morning. He intended to pass the day in making a small gallows, and hang one of the finest of these fish in the middle of his room, the red color evidently conveying an allusion to the cardinal, so that he may have the pleasure of hanging Mazarin in effigy without being accused of having hung anything more significant than a crawfish. The day was employed in preparations for the execution. Every one grows childish in prison, but the character of Monsieur de Beaufort was particularly disposed to become so. In the course of his morning's walk he collected 2 or 3 small branches from a tree, and found a small piece of broken glass, a discovery that quite delighted him. When he came home he formed his handkerchief into a loop. Nothing of all this escaped Grimaud, but La Ramee looked on with the curiosity of a father, who thinks that he may perhaps get a cheap idea concerning a new toy for his children. The guards looked on it with indifference. When everything was ready, the gallows hung in the middle of the room, the loop made, and when the Duke had cast a glance upon the plate of crawfish, in order to select the finest specimen among them, he looked around for his piece of glass. It had disappeared. "Who has taken my piece of glass?" asked the Duke, frowning. Grimaud made a sign to denote that he had done so. "What, you again? Why didst you take it?" "Yes, why?" asked La Ramee. Grimaud, who held the piece of glass in his hand, said, sharp. "True, my lord," exclaimed La Ramee. "Ah, deuce take it, we have a precious fellow here." "Monsieur Grimaud," said the Duke, "for your sake I beg of you, never come within the reach of my fist." "Hush, hush," cried La Ramee. "Give me your gibbet, my lord. I will shape it out for you with my knife." And he took the gibbet and shaped it out as neatly as possible. "That's it," said the Duke. "Now make me a little hole in the floor whilst I go and fetch the culprit." La Ramee knelt down and made a hole in the floor. Meanwhile the Duke hung the crawfish up by a thread. Then he placed the gibbet in the middle of the room, bursting with laughter. La Ramee laughed also, and the guards laughed in chorus. Grimaud, however, did not even smile. He approached La Ramee, and showing him the crawfish hung up by the thread, "Cardinal," he said. "Hung by order of His Highness the Duc de Beaufort," cried the prisoner, laughing violently, "and by Master Jacques Chrysostom La Ramee, the king's commissioner." La Ramee uttered a cry of horror, and rushed toward the gibbet, which he broke at once and threw the pieces out of the window. He was going to throw the crawfish out also, when Grimaud snatched it from his hands. "Good to eat," he said, and put it in his pocket. This scene so enchanted the Duke, that at the moment he forgave Grimaud for his part in it, but on reflection he hated him more and more, being convinced he had some evil motive for his conduct. But the story of the crab made a great noise through the interior of the donjon and evening outside. Monsieur de Chavigny, who at heart detested the cardinal, took pains to tell the story to 2 or 3 friends, who put it into immediate circulation. The prisoner happened to remark among the guards one man with a very good countenance, and he favored this man the more as Grimaud became the more and more odious to him. One morning he took this man on one side and had succeeded in speaking to him, when Grimaud entered and seeing what was going on approached the Duke respectfully, but took the guard by the arm. "Go away," he said. The guard obeyed. "You are insupportable," cried the Duke. "I shall beat you." Grimaud bowed. "I will break every bone in your body," cried the Duke. Grimaud bowed, but stepped back. "Mr. Spy," cried the Duke, more and more enraged, "I will strangle you with my own hands." And he extended his hands toward Grimaud, who merely thrust the guard out and shut the door behind him. At the same time he felt the Duke's arms on his shoulders like two iron claws. But instead either of calling out or defending himself, he placed his forefinger on his lips and said in a low tone, "Hush," smiling as he uttered the word. A gesture, a smile, and a word from Grimaud, all at once, were so unusual that his Highness stopped short, astounded. Grimaud took advantage of that instant to draw from his vest a charming little note with an aristocratic seal, and presented it to the Duke without a word. The Duke, more and more bewildered, let Grimaud loose and took the note. "From Madame de Montbazon?" he cried. Grimaud nodded assent. The Duke tore open the note, passed his hands over his eyes, for he was dazzled and confused, and read, "My dear Duke, you may entirely confide in the brave lad who will give you this note. He has consented to enter the service of your keeper and to shut himself up at Vincennes with you, in order to prepare and assist your escape, which we are contriving. The moment of your deliverance is at hand. Have patience and courage, and remember that in spite of time and absence all your friends continue to cherish for you the sentiments they have so long professed and truly entertained. Yours wholly and most affectionately, Marie de Montbazon. P.S. I sign my full name, for I should be vain if I could suppose that after 5 years of absence you would remember my initials." The poor Duke became perfectly giddy. What for 5 years he had been wanting, a faithful servant, a friend, a helping hand, seemed to have fallen from heaven just when he expected it the least. "Oh, dearest Marie, she thinks of me, then, after 5 years of separation. Heavens, there is constancy." Then turning to Grimaud, he said, "And you, my brave fellow, you consentest thus to aid me?" Grimaud signified his assent. "And you have come here with that purpose?" Grimaud repeated the sign. "And I was ready to strangle you," cried the Duke. Grimaud smiled. "Wait, then," said the Duke, fumbling in his pocket. "Wait," he continued, renewing his fruitless search. "It shall not be said that such devotion to a grandson of Henry Roman IV went without recompense." The Duke's endeavors evinced the best intention in the world, but one of the precautions taken at Vincennes was that of allowing prisoners to keep no money, upon which Grimaud, observing the Duke's disappointment, drew from his pocket a purse filled with gold and handed it to him. "Here is what you are looking for," he said. The Duke opened the purse and wanted to empty it into Grimaud's hands, but Grimaud shook his head. "Thank you, Monseigneur," he said, drawing back. "I'm paid." The Duke went from one surprise to another. He held out his hand. Grimaud drew near and kissed it respectfully. The grand manner of Athos had left its mark on Grimaud. "What shall we do? And when? And how proceed?" "It is now 11, answered Grimaud. "Let my lord at 2 o'clock ask leave to make up a game at tennis with La Ramee, and let him send 2 or 3 balls over the ramparts. And then, your Highness will approach the walls and call out to a man who works in the moat to send them back again." "I understand," said the Duke. Grimaud made a sign that he was going away. "Ah," cried the Duke, "will you not accept any money from me? I wish my lord would make me one promise." "What? Speak." "It is this: when we escape together, that I shall go everywhere and be always first, for if my lord should be overtaken and caught, there's every chance of his being brought back to prison, while if I am caught, the least that can befall me is to be hung." "True, on my honor as a gentleman it shall be as you do suggest." "Now," resumed Grimaud, "I've only one thing more to ask, that your Highness will continue to detest me." "I'll try," said the Duke. At this moment La Ramee, after the interview we have described with the cardinal, entered the room. The Duke had thrown himself, as he was wont to do in moments of dullness and vexation, on his bed. La Ramee cast an inquiring look around him, and observing the same signs of antipathy between the prisoner and his guardian, he smiled in token of his inward satisfaction. Then turning to Grimaud, "Very good, my friend, very good. You have been spoken of in a promising quarter, and you will soon, I hope, have news that will be agreeable to you." Grimaud saluted in his politest manner and withdrew, as was his custom on the entrance of his superior. "Well, my lord," said La Ramee, with his rude laugh, "you still set yourself against this poor fellow?" "So, It is you, La Ramee. In faith, it is time you came back again. I threw myself on the bed and turned my nose to the wall, that I mightn't break my promise and strangle Grimaud. I doubt, however, said La Ramee, in sprightly allusion to the silence of his subordinate, if he has said anything disagreeable to your highness. Part02. You are right, a mute from the east. I swear it was time for you to come back, La Ramee, and I was eager to see you again. Monseigneur is too good, said La Ramee, flattered by the compliment. Yes, continued the Duke, really, I feel bored today beyond the power of description. Then let us have a match in the tennis court, exclaimed La Ramee. If you wish it, I am at your service, my lord. I protest, my dear La Ramee, said the Duke, that you are a charming fellow and that I would stay forever at Vincennes to have the pleasure of your society. My lord, replied La Ramee, I think if it depended on the cardinal your wishes would be fulfilled. What do you mean? Have you seen him lately? He sent for me today. Really, to speak to you about me? Of what else do you imagine he would speak to me? Really, my lord, you are his nightmare. The Duke smiled with bitterness. Ah, La Ramee, if you would but accept my offers, I would make your fortune. How? You would no sooner have left prison than your goods would be confiscated. I shall no sooner be out of prison than I shall be master of Paris. Pshaw, pshaw, I cannot hear such things said as that. This is a fine conversation with an officer of the king. I see, my lord, I shall be obliged to fetch a second Grimaud. Very well, let us say no more about it. So you and the cardinal have been talking about me, La Ramee. Some day when he sends for you, you must let me put on your clothes. I will go in your stead. I will strangle him, and upon my honor, if that is made a condition, I will return to prison. Monseigneur, I see well that I must call Grimaud. Well, I am wrong. And what did the quizzer pettifogger say about me? I admit the word, Monseigneur, because it rhymes with minister. What did he say to me? He told me to watch you. And why so? Why watch me? Asked the Duke uneasily. Because an astrologer had predicted that you would escape. Ah, an astrologer predicted that, said the Duke, starting in spite of himself. Oh, mon Dieu, yes. Those imbeciles of magicians can only imagine things to torment honest people. And what did you reply to his most illustrious eminence? That, if the astrologer in question made almanacs, I would advise him not to buy one. Why not? Because before you could escape you would have to be turned into a bird. Unfortunately, that is true. Let us go and have a game at tennis, La Ramee. My lord, I beg your highness's pardon, but I must beg for half an hour's leave of absence. Why? Because Monseigneur Mazarin is a prouder man than his highness, though not of such high birth. He forgot to ask me to breakfast. Well, shall I send for some breakfast here? No, my lord. I must tell you that the confectioner who lived opposite the castle, Daddy Marteau, as they called him, well, he sold his business a week ago to a confectioner from Paris, an invalid, ordered country air for his health. Well, what have I to do with that? Why, good lord, this man, your highness, when he saw me stop before his shop, where he has a display of things which would make your mouth water, my lord, asked me to get him the custom of the prisoners in the donjon. I bought, said he, the business of my predecessor on the strength of his assurance that he supplied the castle, while, on my honor, Monsieur de Chavigny, though I've been here a week, has not ordered so much as a tartlet. But, I then replied, probably Monsieur de Chavigny is afraid your pastry is not good. My pastry not good? Well, Monsieur La Ramee, you shall judge of it yourself, and at once. I cannot, I replied. It is absolutely necessary for me to return to the CHO. Very well, said he, go and attend to your affairs, since you seem to be in a hurry, but come back in half an hour. In half an hour? Yes, have you breakfasted? Faith, no. Well, here is a PT that will be ready for you, with a bottle of old Burgundy. So, you see, my lord, since I am hungry, I would, with your highness's leave, and La Ramee bent low. Go, then, animal, said the Duke, but remember, I only allow you half an hour. May I promise your custom to the successor of Father Mardo, my lord? Yes, if he does not put mushrooms in his pies. You knowest that mushrooms from the wood of Vincennes are fatal to my family. La Remy went out, but in 5 minutes one of the officers of the guard entered in compliance with the strict orders of the cardinal that the prisoner should never be left alone a moment. But during these 5 minutes the Duke had had time to read again the note from Madame de Montbazon, which proved to the prisoner that his friends were concerting plans for his deliverance, but in what way he knew not.